The assignment came in on a Tuesday in late February at 4:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was watching the clock on my phone, counting down the seconds until I could finish my work and head home. But then my company tablet buzzed with a new assignment. Emergency coastal transport. Refrigerated medicines. Deadline is critical. Route 1A, north to Harbor's End. Move immediately. I stared at the screen for 10 seconds, hoping that if I looked long enough, the message would change. In February, Route 1A meant one thing: the frozen coastline. This highway stretches about 200 miles along the Atlantic, passing through areas where ocean spray freezes in the air and coats everything in a thick layer of glass-like ice. Most drivers avoid this road in winter, at least the sensible ones. But I needed the money. My ex-wife's lawyer had made sure of that. The divorce settlement was bleeding me dry, and every extra run meant I could maybe afford to see my daughter for her birthday next month. So I signed off on the dispatch, grabbed my thermos of coffee that had gone cold 3 hours ago, and headed out to the yard. My rig was a 2015 Peterbilt. Dark blue with silver stripes. She wasn't the newest truck in the fleet, but she was reliable. I'd been driving her for 2 years, ever since I started working for Northway Logistics. I did my pre-trip inspection in the fading daylight, checking the tires, the brake lines, the fifth wheel connection. Everything looked good. The refrigerated trailer was already loaded and hooked up, humming quietly as it kept whatever was inside at the required temperature. The sun was setting as I pulled out of the depot, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if I wasn't so focused on the road ahead. I merged onto the highway heading north, leaving the city lights behind. The further I drove, the darker it got. By the time I reached the turnoff for Route 1A, it was full night. The temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees in the past hour. I could see it on the dashboard display, 18 degrees Fahrenheit and falling. The road ahead was empty, just 2 lanes of asphalt cutting through pine forests that seemed to press in from both sides. I flipped on the high beams and settled in for the long haul. Route 1A starts inland, winding through rural communities that look like they were abandoned sometime in the 1970s and never quite recovered. Boarded-up gas stations, churches with broken windows, the occasional house with a single light burning in the window, making me wonder who still lived out here and why. The road gradually curves eastward, and after about 40 miles, you start to smell the ocean even with the windows closed. I'd driven this route twice before, both times in summer. During the day, it's actually beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving kind of way. Rocky cliffs dropping straight down to the water. Seabirds wheeling overhead, waves crashing against stone formations that have stood there for millions of years. But at night, in winter, it becomes something else entirely. The first sign that I was getting close to the coast was the wind. It came out of nowhere, a sudden gust that rocked the truck and made me tighten my grip on the steering wheel. Then another gust, harder this time. The empty trailer behind me swayed slightly, and I eased off the accelerator. The last thing I needed was to jackknife on a coastal highway in the middle of the night. The trees thinned out, replaced by low scrub and rocks. Then the ocean appeared on my right, a vast darkness that seemed to absorb all light. The moon was up, nearly full, and it turned the frozen spray along the shoreline into something that glittered like broken glass. Beautiful and deadly. I checked the GPS. Harbor's End was still 93 miles away. I had maybe 4 hours of driving ahead of me, assuming the weather held and the roads stayed clear. I took a sip of cold coffee and grimaced. Should have stopped for a fresh cup, but the dispatcher had said, "Depart immediately," and I'd learned not to argue with dispatch. The highway here runs about 50 yards from the edge of the cliffs. There's no guardrail, just a white line painted on the asphalt and then Nothing but air and rocks and freezing water. I kept the truck firmly in the left lane, as far from that edge as possible. The wind was getting stronger, and I could hear it howling around the cab, a low, moaning sound that rose and fell like something breathing. That's when I noticed the ice. Not on the road, at least not yet, but coating everything else. The rocks, the scrub, the few stunted trees that managed to grow this close to the ocean. Everything was encased in ice, reflecting the moonlight in weird, distorted ways. It made the landscape look alien, like I was driving on some frozen planet instead of the main coast. I'd been on the coastal stretch for maybe 20 minutes when I saw the first odd thing. It was small, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. A reflector post on the right side of the road, the kind they put up to mark the edge of the pavement when it snows. Except this one had something hanging from it, something dark and irregular that swayed in the wind. I slowed down as I approached, trying to get a better look. It was hard to tell in the headlights, but it looked like fabric. A piece of cloth, maybe, or a plastic bag. I told myself it was trash, blown up from the ocean and caught on the post. That made sense. Wind this strong could carry all kinds of debris. But as I passed it, my headlights caught it at just the right angle, and for a split second I could have sworn it looked like a coat. A child's coat. Dark blue or black, with the arms spread out like someone was hanging there. I looked in the side mirror trying to see it again, but it was already behind me, swallowed by the darkness. Probably just a trash bag, I told myself. The wind and the darkness were playing tricks on my eyes. That happens sometimes on long night drives. Your brain starts filling in details that aren't really there. I shook my head and focused on the road. The white line glowed in my headlights, a steady guide leading me north. The ocean roared somewhere to my right, waves crashing against the frozen rocks with a sound like thunder. Between the wind and the waves, the noise was almost deafening, even inside the cab. The heater was running full blast, but I could still feel the cold seeping in around the edges of the doors and windows. I cranked it up another notch and pulled my jacket tighter. The temperature outside had dropped to 14 degrees. Inside the cab, it was maybe 65, but it felt colder. 10 miles later, I saw another reflector post. This one also had something hanging from it. I was ready this time, watching carefully as I approached. It was definitely fabric, and it was definitely moving in the wind. But this one looked different, larger. As I got closer, my headlights illuminated it clearly. It was a shirt, a man's work shirt, blue denim with the sleeves spread wide. It was buttoned up, as if someone was still wearing it, but there was nothing inside. Just an empty shirt hanging from the post, twisting slowly in the wind. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. This wasn't trash. Someone had put that there deliberately. But why? And who? I kept driving, but I was watching the right side of the road more carefully now. Sure enough, a few miles later, there was another post. Another piece of clothing. This one looked like pants, tied around the post with the legs dangling down. Then a jacket. Then what looked like a dress. Every few miles, another post, another article of clothing, all carefully arranged like scarecrows without bodies. All empty, all moving in the wind like they were alive. I tried to think of a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was some kind of art installation. People did weird things along coastal highways sometimes, trying to make statements about the ocean or climate change or whatever. Or maybe it was a memorial. People left crosses and flowers at accident sites all the time. Maybe this was something similar. But deep down, I knew those explanations didn't fit. There was something wrong about the whole thing. The way the clothes were arranged, spread out like bodies. The way they appeared at regular intervals, like markers. The way they moved in the wind, almost like they were waving at me as I passed. I checked my phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here. The coastal stretch was remote, and cell towers were few and far between. I'd have to wait until I got closer to Harbor's End before I could call anyone. The road curved inland slightly, following the contour of a bay. The wind died down a bit, and the roar of the waves faded to a distant rumble. I allowed myself to relax slightly. Maybe the weird roadside display was behind me now. But then I came around a bend and saw it, a rest area ahead on the right. I almost missed it. There was no sign, no lights, just a gravel turnoff leading to a small parking area maybe 100 feet from the road. I wouldn't have noticed it at all except for one thing. There was a truck parked there, a semi like mine, sitting in the darkness with no lights on. As I passed the turnoff, my headlights swept across it briefly. It was an older model, white, with rust spots visible even in the quick glimpse I got. And it was covered in ice, thick layers of it coating the cab and trailer like it had been sitting there for weeks. I should have kept driving. Every instinct I had told me to keep my foot on the accelerator and put as much distance between myself and that frozen truck as possible. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself slowing down, then pulling onto the shoulder about a quarter mile past the rest area. I sat there for a long moment, engine idling, trying to decide what to do. The sensible thing would be to keep going. Someone else's truck wasn't my problem. They probably broke down and called for a tow, and that ice buildup just meant the truck had been sitting there a while. None of my business. But what if someone was still in there? What if a driver had pulled off to rest and gotten stranded somehow? This far north, in these temperatures, a person could freeze to death in a few hours without heat. I'd heard stories about drivers who fell asleep in their cabs during winter storms and never woke up. I put the truck in reverse and carefully backed up along the shoulder until I reached the turnoff. The rest area was dark, no lights at all, and the gravel parking lot was completely empty except for that one truck. I pulled in slowly, my headlights sweeping across the scene. The truck definitely looked abandoned. The ice was so thick I couldn't see through the windows. The tires were buried in drifted snow that had frozen solid. I parked about 20 feet away, leaving my engine running and my lights on, and grabbed my flashlight from under the seat. The cold hit me like a physical blow when I opened the door. The wind had picked up again, blowing straight off the ocean, and it carried tiny particles of ice that stung my exposed skin. I pulled my jacket hood up and clicked on the flashlight. Walking toward the abandoned truck felt wrong. Every step I took, some part of my brain was screaming at me to turn around and get back in my warm cab. But I kept going, my boots crunching on the frozen gravel. Up close, the truck looked even worse. The ice wasn't just coating it. It had formed strange patterns, like fingers or roots spreading across the metal. The driver's side door was slightly ajar, and a thin layer of snow had drifted into the gap. I reached for the handle. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint and distant, coming from somewhere behind the truck. It sounded like someone calling for help, but the wind distorted it, making it impossible to tell if it was male or female, or even human. It could have been the wind itself, moaning through some gap in the rocks along the coast. I stood there, frozen, listening. The sound came again, clearer this time. Help. Definitely a word. Definitely a voice. And it was coming from the ocean side of the rest area where the ground sloped down toward the cliffs. I pointed my flashlight in that direction, but the beam only penetrated about 30 feet into the darkness before being swallowed up. I could hear the waves crashing below, louder now, and the wind was howling like something alive. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded small and weak against the roar of the elements. "Is someone there?" No response, just the wind and the waves and the creaking of ice-covered trees. I waited another minute, then turned back to the truck. The door was still ajar. I pulled it open, wincing as ice cracked and fell away. The interior was dark and empty, the seats covered in frost. No driver, no personal belongings, nothing that indicated anyone had been here recently. I was about to close the door when I noticed something on the passenger seat. A logbook, frozen, partially open. I reached in and carefully pried it loose from the ice. The last entry was dated January 15th, more than a month ago. The handwriting was shaky, hard to read, but I could make out a few words. Can't find the road. Keep going in circles. The voices won't stop. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I dropped the logbook back onto the seat and backed away from the truck. I needed to get out of here, now. As I turned toward my rig, I heard that voice again. "Help me." Closer this time, much closer, coming from right behind me. I spun around, flashlight raised like a weapon. There was nothing there, just the abandoned truck, the frozen ground, the darkness beyond my light. "Help me," again, but this time it sounded like it was coming from my left. I swung the flashlight in that direction. Nothing. "Help me," now from my right. "Help me," behind me. "Help me," all around me. Multiple voices now, overlapping and echoing, coming from every direction at once. I ran. I don't remember making the decision. My legs just started moving on their own. I sprinted across the frozen gravel, slipping and nearly falling twice, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the voices following me, getting louder, more insistent. I reached my truck and yanked the door open, practically throwing myself inside. I slammed it shut and locked it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the keys in the ignition. The engine was still running, thank God. I threw it in gear and hit the accelerator. The tires spun for a second on the icy gravel before finding purchase. The truck lurched forward, and I steered back toward the highway, not caring about the careful, slow approach I'd used to get in here. I just wanted out. As I reached the road and swung back onto the pavement, I made the mistake of looking in my side mirror. In the red glow of my taillights, I could see the rest area receding behind me. And I could swear I saw figures standing there, dozens of them, silhouetted against the darkness, all watching me leave. I faced forward and kept my eyes on the road, pressing the accelerator harder than I should have on these conditions. The speedometer climbed to 50, then 55, then 60. Too fast for this road, but I didn't care. I needed distance between myself and whatever the hell that was. After about 10 miles, when my heart rate had finally started to slow down, I allowed myself to think about what had just happened. The logical part of my brain tried to explain it away. The voices were just the wind. The figures were shadows and ice formations. The logbook was probably from some driver who got stuck in a storm and exaggerated what happened. But I knew what I'd heard. Those were voices, real human voices, calling for help. And that logbook entry, "Keep going in circles. The voices won't stop." What did that mean? I checked the GPS. Harbor's End was now only 47 miles away. Less than an hour if I kept up this pace. I could make it. I just had to stay on the road and keep moving forward. The coastline was back on my right now, the frozen cliffs gleaming in the moonlight. The wind had died down slightly, and the ride was smoother. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. I was fine. I was safe. I was in a 2-ton truck with a full tank of gas, heading toward the civilization. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The mile markers. I'd just passed mile marker 127. I watched the next one approach. 126. Then 125. Then 124. Normal, counting down as I drove north. But then I saw 125 again. I blinked, sure I'd misread it. But no, the next marker was definitely 125. Then 126, then 127. The markers were going backward. I was heading north, but the mile markers indicated I was going south, back the way I'd come. I slowed down, staring at the markers as I passed them. 127, 126, 125, 124, 123, then 124, 125, 126, 127. Up and down, like I was driving in circles even though the road ahead was straight. This wasn't possible. Mile markers didn't work like this. They were fixed, permanent, installed by the highway department to mark distance. They couldn't change. I focused on the GPS. It still showed me heading north, getting closer to Harbor's End. The map showed the road as a simple line following the coast. Nothing about circles or loops. Just a straight route from point A to point B. But the mile markers kept flickering. Forward, backward, forward, backward. And now that I was paying attention, I realized something else was wrong. The road itself looked the same. Not just similar, but identical. That rock formation on the right, I'd passed it before. And that dead tree on the left, branches coated in ice, I'd seen it already. I was going in circles. Somehow, impossibly, I was driving in circles on a straight road. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The speedometer hit 70. The truck shook with the speed, the wind resistance, the rough pavement. I didn't care. I had to break out of this loop, had to get past whatever geographical anomaly was causing this. The GPS showed I was making progress. 43 miles to Harbor's End, then 40, then 38. The numbers were counting down normally, even if the mile markers and landmarks weren't. I decided to trust the GPS. It was satellite-based, receiving signals from space. It couldn't be fooled by whatever was happening with the physical road. I kept my eyes on the screen, watching the little blue arrow that represented my truck inch steadily northward along the route. 35 miles. 32. 28. The road began to climb, rising up away from the immediate coastline. The trees grew thicker on either side, blocking the view of the ocean. This was new, different from the loop I'd been stuck in. I was making real progress. 25 miles to Harbor's End. I allowed myself a small sigh of relief. Whatever had happened back there, I was past it now. The road was normal again. The mile markers were counting down correctly. Everything was fine, except it wasn't. Because now I could see lights ahead. Not street lights or house lights, but something else. They were blue-white and bright, like the emergency flashers on a police car, but not flashing, just glowing steadily in the darkness ahead. As I got closer, I realized what I was looking at. A truck. Another semi parked on the shoulder covered in ice, and it looked exactly like the abandoned truck from the rest area. I slowed down as I approached, my heart hammering in my chest. This couldn't be the same truck. I'd left that rest area miles behind. The GPS confirmed I'd been driving steadily north for the past half hour. There was no way I'd somehow circled back. But as my headlights illuminated it, I could see the rust spots in the same places. The same thick coating of ice with those strange finger-like patterns. The driver's door was ajar, just like before, with snow drifted into the gap. I didn't stop this time. I kept rolling past, my eyes locked on the truck as I went by. The passenger window was coated in ice, but I could swear I saw a shadow inside. A darker shape against the frosted glass. Like someone was sitting there watching me pass. I looked away and focused on the road ahead. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. This wasn't possible. Trucks didn't teleport. I hadn't turned around. I'd been driving in a straight line for miles. The GPS still showed me heading toward Harbor's End, now 23 miles away. But how could I trust it? How could I trust anything when the physical evidence of my eyes told me I was going in circles? I drove for another 10 minutes, the road climbing higher into the hills above the coast. The wind was stronger up here, rocking the truck with each gust. I could hear the trailer swaying behind me, the load shifting slightly despite the tie-downs. I eased off the accelerator, not wanting to lose control. That's when the snow started. Just a few flakes at first, dancing in my headlights, but within minutes it was coming down harder. Big, wet flakes that stuck to the windshield and reduced visibility to maybe 100 feet. I turned the wipers on high and slowed down to 40 miles per hour. The GPS showed 18 miles to Harbor's End. I was so close. I just had to keep going for another 20 minutes, maybe 30 in these conditions, and I'd be there. I'd deliver the load, collect my pay, and never take a coastal run in winter again. I didn't care how much they offered me. The snow was getting worse. I could barely see the road now, just a vague white corridor between dark trees. The wind was howling and I could feel the truck being pushed sideways with each gust. I dropped my speed to 30, then 25. Something appeared in my headlights ahead. I squinted through the snow, trying to make it out. It was dark and irregular, standing in the middle of the road. I hit the brakes, feeling the truck slide slightly on the snow-covered pavement before the ABS caught and brought me to a controlled stop. I sat there, engine idling, wipers working overtime to clear the windshield. The shape ahead resolved itself into a person. Someone was standing in the middle of the road, facing me. They were wearing what looked like a long coat, dark-colored, and they weren't moving. Just standing there in the blowing snow like a statue. I honked the horn. 3 long blasts that echoed weirdly in the snow-muffled night. The figure didn't move. I honked again, leaning on it this time. Still nothing. Whoever it was, they either couldn't hear me or didn't care. I put the truck in park and left the engine running. I didn't want to get out, didn't want to leave the warm safety of the cab, but I couldn't just sit here all night, and I definitely couldn't drive around them. The road was too narrow, with trees pressing in on both sides. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. The wind nearly ripped it out of my hand. Snow immediately began accumulating on the seat. I stepped down onto the pavement, my boots sinking into about 2 inches of fresh powder. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice barely carrying over the wind. "You need to move." The figure didn't respond. I walked toward it, the flashlight beam bouncing crazily in the blowing snow. As I got closer, details became visible. The coat was old-fashioned, like something from the 1950s or earlier, and the person wearing it wasn't moving at all, not even swaying in the wind. I was about 20 feet away when I realized why. It wasn't a person, it was another piece of clothing, just like the ones I'd seen hanging on the reflector posts. This coat was much larger, heavier, and someone had stuffed it with something to make it stand upright. Sticks or branches, maybe, forming a rough skeleton inside the fabric. I lowered the flashlight, relief washing over me. Not a person, just another weird roadside display. I could push it off to the side and keep going, but as I reached out to grab it, the coat moved. Not from the wind. This was different. The arms rose slowly, spreading wide like it was welcoming me into an embrace. And then it fell apart, collapsing in on itself as whatever was holding it up gave way. I jumped back, my heart racing. When I pointed the flashlight at the pile of fabric, I could see there was nothing inside. No sticks, no frame, nothing that could have made it stand up or move. Just an empty coat lying in the snow. I ran back to the truck, not caring how it looked, not caring about anything except getting away from that thing. I threw myself into the cab and slammed the door, breathing hard. Through the windshield, I could see the coat still lying in the road where it had fallen. I put the truck in gear and drove around it, giving it as wide a berth as the narrow road allowed. The tires spun slightly in the snow before catching. I accelerated carefully, climbing up through the gears, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The GPS showed 14 miles to Harbor's End. 14 miles. I could do this. Whatever was happening out here, whatever weird art project or sick joke this was, I could survive 14 more miles. But the snow was getting worse. The visibility dropped to maybe 50 feet, then 40. I was crawling along at 20 miles per hour, hunched over the steering wheel, straining to see the road. The white line on the right was my only guide, a faint stripe that occasionally disappeared under drifted snow. I'd been driving for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes when I saw lights ahead again. Red lights this time, tail lights. Another vehicle on the road. Relief flooded through me. I wasn't alone out here anymore. Someone else was crazy enough to be driving in these conditions. I accelerated slightly, trying to close the distance. Maybe we could convoy together, make the last few miles to Harbor's End safer. But as I got closer, I realized something was off. The vehicle ahead wasn't moving. The taillights were stationary, just glowing in the darkness like red eyes watching me approach. I slowed down, caution overriding my desire for company. As my headlights illuminated the vehicle, my stomach dropped. It was a semi, white, with rust spots, covered in ice, the same truck, again. But that was impossible. I'd passed it twice already, miles apart, and I hadn't turned around, hadn't made any turns at all. The road had been straight, just one continuous climb into the hills. There was no way I could have circled back to the same truck a third time. I stopped about 50 feet behind it and put the truck in park. My hands were shaking again, and I felt a pressure building behind my eyes like I was about to cry or scream, or both. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. I looked at the GPS. It showed me 11 miles from Harbor's End, still on Route 1A, heading north. The little blue arrow representing my truck was in the right place, but the physical evidence said otherwise. I thought about the logbook I'd found in the truck the first time. Can't find the road. Keep going in circles. The voices won't stop. The voices. I hadn't heard them since the rest area, but now that I thought about it, I could hear something under the wind noise. A low murmuring, like multiple people talking at once but too far away to make out words. I rolled down the window slightly, letting in a blast of cold air and snow. The murmuring got louder. It was definitely voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all overlapping into a wall of sound that rose and fell like waves. I rolled the window back up, my heart pounding. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I was hallucinating, that was the only explanation. The long hours, the stress of the drive, the isolation. It was all catching up to me. I was having some kind of breakdown, but I didn't feel crazy. I felt terrified, yes, but my mind was clear. I knew where I was, what day it was, what I was supposed to be doing. I wasn't delusional or confused. I was just stuck on a road that didn't make sense, seeing things that shouldn't exist. I looked at the abandoned truck again. The driver's door was ajar, just like before. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that if I got out and opened that door, I'd find the same logbook on the passenger seat with the same entry dated January 15th. I wondered about the driver who'd written that entry. Where were they now? Still out here somewhere, wandering in the snow, their voice adding to the chorus I could hear murmuring in the darkness. The snow was piling up on my windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. I needed to move, needed to make a decision. I could sit here until the storm buried me, or I could keep driving and hope that somehow, eventually, I'd break out of this loop. I chose to drive. I put the truck in gear and steered around the abandoned vehicle, my tires crunching through deepening snow. As I passed it, I refused to look at the driver's side window. I didn't want to see if there was someone, or something, sitting inside this time. The road ahead disappeared into a white wall of blowing snow. I could barely see 10 feet in front of the truck. This was insane. I should pull over, wait out the storm. But where? There was nowhere to stop that felt safe. And part of me feared that if I stopped moving, I'd never start again. I'd become another abandoned truck on the side of Route 1A, another mystery for the next driver who came through. I kept going, creeping along at 15 miles per hour, using the barely visible edge line as my guide. The wind was screaming now, rocking the truck so hard I had to fight the wheel to keep it straight. The load in the trailer was shifting. I could hear it sliding back and forth despite the straps. 9 miles to Harbor's End, according to the GPS. But I didn't trust it anymore. The numbers could say anything. I could drive for hours and still see the same distance displayed. Something darted across the road ahead. I caught just a glimpse in the headlights, a dark shape, low to the ground, moving fast from right to left. I slammed on the brakes and the truck slid for what felt like forever before stopping. I sat there, breathing hard, staring at the empty road ahead. What had that been? An animal? A deer, maybe? Or a dog? It had moved wrong, though, too fast, too fluid. Not like any animal I'd ever seen. The voices were louder now. I could almost make out words. Help! Lost! Cold! Can't find... I cranked up the radio, trying to drown them out. Static roared from the speakers, punctuated by strange howls and whistles that might have been interference or might have been something else. I spun through the channels, AM, FM, CB, but there was nothing except noise. No music, no talk shows, no weather reports. Just static and those weird sounds that almost seemed to form words. I turned it off. The silence was worse somehow. I could hear the voices clearly now, coming from all directions, pressing against the cab like invisible hands. Lost, help us, so cold, can't find the way, shut up! I screamed at them, slamming my palm against the steering wheel. Shut up, shut up, shut up! The voices stopped, completely, instantly. Even the wind seemed to die down. The sudden silence was deafening. I sat there in the eerie quiet, my breath coming in short gasps. Snow continued to fall, but gently now, straight down instead of being driven sideways by the wind. I could see maybe 100 feet ahead, and what I saw made my heart sink. The road ahead was blocked, not by another truck or a fallen tree, but by a wall of ice. It rose straight up from the pavement, maybe 20 feet high, completely filling the road from edge to edge. The surface was rough and irregular, covered in strange formations that looked almost like faces pressed against the ice from the inside. I stared at it, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Roads didn't just end in walls of ice. That wasn't a thing that happened in the real world. But there it was, solid and impassable, blocking my way forward. I checked the GPS, 7 miles to Harbor's End. The map showed the road continuing straight ahead, no obstacles, no barriers. Just a normal highway leading to a normal town. I looked up at the ice wall again. It was still there. And now that I was really looking at it, those face-like formations were moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, mouths opening and closing, eyes tracking my movements. I threw the truck in reverse and backed up, my hands slipping on the wheel. I didn't care about careful or controlled anymore. I just needed to get away from that wall and whatever was frozen inside it. The truck lurched backward, the trailer fishtailing slightly in the snow. I straightened it out and kept reversing until I'd put maybe 100 yards between myself and the ice wall. Then I stopped and tried to think. I couldn't go forward. I couldn't go back. Every time I tried, I ended up at that abandoned truck. I was trapped on a stretch of road that looped back on itself, with no visible exit and no way to call for help. The logical part of my brain kept insisting there had to be an explanation. Geographic anomaly, navigation error, equipment malfunction, something rational and explainable, but the rest of me knew better. This was something else, something outside the normal rules of reality. I thought about that logbook again. The driver who'd written it had been stuck just like me, driving in circles, unable to find the way out. What had happened to them? Were they still out here somewhere? Or had they found a way out that I hadn't discovered yet? Or had they become part of the voices, part of the chorus of lost souls calling for help in the darkness? I shook my head, trying to clear that thought. I wasn't going to end up like that. I was getting out of here. I just needed to figure out how. I looked around, really looked, trying to see past the snow and darkness for anything that might help. The trees on either side of the road were thick, impenetrable. No way to drive through them. But maybe there was a side road I'd missed, a turnoff or logging trail that wasn't on the GPS. I put the truck in drive and crept forward slowly, scanning both sides of the road. The snow was letting up again, and visibility was improving. I could see maybe 200 feet now, enough to spot any gaps in the tree line. Nothing on the left. But on the right, about a quarter-mile ahead, there was something. Not a road exactly, but a break in the trees. A space where I might be able to turn around if I was careful. I approached it slowly, my headlights illuminating what looked like an old access road or driveway. It was narrow, barely wide enough for my truck, and it was completely unplowed. But it led away from the main road, and right now, that was the only direction that mattered. I turned the wheel and carefully guided the truck into the gap. Branches scraped against the sides of the cab with a screech like fingernails on metal. The ground was uneven, and I could feel the truck bouncing over hidden rocks and roots. But I was making progress, moving perpendicular to the cursed highway. The access road curved to the left, then to the right, winding between massive pine trees. Snow covered everything, making it impossible to see what was beneath. I could be driving over solid ground, or a frozen stream, or the edge of a cliff. No way to know. After about 5 minutes of careful driving, the trees opened up slightly and I found myself in a small clearing. And there, in the middle of that clearing, was a building. It was a house. Or it had been a house once. 2 stories, old colonial style, with a wraparound porch and dark windows that reflected my headlights like dead eyes. The paint was peeling, what little I could see of it under the layers of ice and snow. One of the porch posts had collapsed, leaving that section of the roof sagging at a dangerous angle. I sat in the idling truck, staring at the house, trying to decide what to do. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around and find another way out. But the clearing wasn't quite large enough for a full turn with the trailer attached, and backing up that winding access road in the dark seemed like a good way to crash into a tree. Besides, the house meant people had lived here once. And if people had lived here, there had to be a real road leading out. Maybe on the other side of the building, a proper driveway that connected to a different highway. A way out of this nightmare. I pulled forward slowly, circling around to the far side of the house. There was a road there, just barely visible under the snow. It was narrow, but looked passable. It led off into the trees, heading roughly northeast if I was reading the compass correctly. Hope flickered in my chest. This could be it. An escape route the GPS didn't know about because it was private property or unmaintained. I could follow it, get back to civilization, and never think about Route 1A again. But first, I needed to make sure. I needed to see where this road went before committing to it. If it dead-ended a mile up, I'd be stuck trying to back a 50-foot trailer through the woods in the dark. I put the truck in park, but left the engine running. I'd just walk up the road a little way, scout it out, and come back. 5 minutes, 10 at most. I grabbed my flashlight and my phone, even though it still showed no signal, and stepped out of the cab. The cold was brutal. The wind had picked up again, driving snow into my face like needles. I pulled my hood tight and started walking up the road, sweeping my flashlight back and forth to make sure I didn't step into a ditch or hole. The road curved gently through the trees and I followed it for maybe 200 yards. It was rough but seemed solid enough under the snow. No major obstacles, no washouts. I could probably drive it safely. I was about to turn back when I heard something that stopped me cold. A voice, calling from somewhere behind me. "Hello? Is someone there?" I spun it around, my flashlight beam cutting through the falling snow. There was nothing visible, just trees and darkness. But the voice came again, clearer this time. "Please, I need help." It was coming from the direction of the house. I hesitated, every nerve in my body telling me to run back to my truck and get out of here. But what if someone really was in trouble? What if someone had taken shelter in the abandoned house and needed help? I turned and headed back toward the clearing, my flashlight probing ahead. As I emerged from the trees, I could see the house more clearly. One of the upstairs windows had a faint light in it now, flickering like a candle. "Hello?" I called out. "I'm here to help." The light in the window moved, shifted, as if someone was carrying it from one room to another. Then it appeared in a downstairs window, and I could see a silhouette behind the glass. A person, definitely a person, waving at me. I approached the porch cautiously, my boots creaking on the old wooden steps. The front door was slightly open, swinging gently in the wind. I pushed it wider and stepped into a dark hallway. "Hello? Where are you?" The light appeared at the end of the hall, illuminating a doorway to what looked like a kitchen. I walked toward it, my flashlight beam bouncing off walls covered in peeling wallpaper and family photos in dusty frames. The faces in the photos seemed to watch me as I passed. I reached the kitchen doorway and looked inside. The room was empty. No light, no person, nothing. Just an old kitchen with a rusted stove and a table covered in debris. "Where are you?" I called again, louder this time. A creak from above. Footsteps on the second floor, slow and deliberate, moving from one end of the house to the other. I pointed my flashlight at the ceiling, tracking the sound. "I'm coming up," I announced, not sure why I felt the need to warn whoever it was. "Stay where you are." I found the stairs and climbed them carefully, testing each step before putting my full weight on it. Some of them groaned ominously, and one felt soft enough that I skipped it entirely. At the top was a landing with 4 doors, all closed. The footsteps had stopped. Everything was silent except for the wind rattling the windows. "Hello?" My voice echoed strangely in the enclosed space. One of the doors swung open slowly. Not from the wind, there was no draft up here. It just opened on its own, revealing a dark bedroom beyond. I approached it with my flashlight raised. The room was empty except for an old bed frame and a dresser with a cracked mirror. But on the floor, in the dust, I could see footprints. Fresh ones, made recently, leading to the window. I walked over and looked out. The window faced the clearing where my truck was parked, engine still running, headlights cutting through the snow. And standing next to my truck, looking up at the house, was a figure in a long dark coat. My blood ran cold. I was up here. No one had passed me on the stairs. So, who was that standing by my truck? As I watched, the figure raised one arm and pointed directly at the window I was looking through. Directly at me. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the footprints in the dust. I needed to get out of this house, get back to my truck, get the hell away from here. I ran for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, not caring about the creaking or the soft wood. I burst through the front door and into the snow, sprinting across the clearing toward my truck. The figure by the truck didn't move. As I got closer, I could see it more clearly in my headlights. It was wearing the same kind of old-fashioned coat I'd seen standing in the road earlier. and it was completely still, not even swaying in the wind. I slowed down, circling wide to approach the driver's side door from an angle that kept the truck between me and the figure. I climbed into the cab and immediately locked the doors, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage it. The figure still hadn't moved. I put the truck in gear and started rolling forward, heading for the road I'd scouted earlier. As I passed the figure, I made the mistake of looking at it directly. It had no face. Where the features should have been, there was just smooth, blank ice. And yet, I had the overwhelming sensation that it was watching me, tracking my movement with eyes that didn't exist. I pressed the accelerator, not caring about the careful approach anymore. The truck bounced over the rough ground, the trailer swaying wildly behind me. I reached the road and turned onto it, accelerating as fast as I dared in these conditions. In my side mirror, I could see the house and the clearing receding behind me. The figure was gone. No, not gone. It was standing in the road now, in the middle of the path I'd just driven on, still pointing at me with that one raised arm. Then the trees blocked my view, and it was gone. I focused on the road ahead, such as it was. In the dark and snow, it was almost impossible to follow. I was steering by instinct more than sight, trying to keep between the trees, hoping I was still on the road and not about to crash into a ravine. The compass on my dashboard showed I was heading northeast, which was right. If I could just keep going in this direction, I'd eventually hit another highway or town or something. I had to, but the road seemed to be deteriorating. What had been rough but passable was becoming nearly impassable. Rocks and roots protruded through the snow, jolting the truck with each impact. Branches scraped the sides constantly now, and I could hear the trailer hitting obstacles that I couldn't see. Then, without warning, the road just ended. My headlights illuminated a wall of trees ahead, packed so tightly together that even a person would have trouble squeezing through. I slammed on the brakes and stopped with the front bumper maybe a foot from the nearest trunk. I sat there, breathing hard, trying to process this. The road had led here. I'd been following it for nearly a mile. Roads didn't just end like this. There had to be a way through. I opened the door and got out with my flashlight, walking up to examine the trees. They were real, solid, ancient pines that must have been here for 100 years or more, and they formed an impenetrable barrier. There was no way my truck was getting through. I walked back along the road I'd come from, looking for any turn I might have missed, but there was nothing. Just one narrow track leading straight to this dead end. This didn't make sense. But then nothing about tonight made sense. I was in a nightmare version of reality where roads looped back on themselves, houses had occupants that weren't there, and figures made of ice pointed at you with absent eyes. I got back in the truck and sat there, trying to think. I could reverse back the way I'd come, but that would take me past the house again, past that figure that had no face. The thought of it filled me with a dread so profound I could barely breathe. But what choice did I have? The road ahead was blocked. The only way out was back. I put the truck in reverse and started backing up, using my mirrors and the backup camera to navigate. The trailer made this incredibly difficult, especially in the dark with snow limiting visibility. I was moving maybe 5 miles per hour, constantly adjusting the wheel to keep from jackknifing. It took forever. Every minute felt like an hour, and all I could think about was what I'd find when I got back to the clearing. Would the house still be there? Would there be more figures waiting? Finally, I saw the clearing opening up ahead. I backed into it and stopped, my headlights sweeping across the scene as I straightened out. The house was still there, but it looked different. Older, more decrepit. Parts of the roof had collapsed, and several windows were broken. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades, not hours. And there were more figures now, dozens of them, scattered around the clearing, all wearing those long dark coats, all standing perfectly still, all facing my truck. I sat frozen in horror, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. Where had they come from? They hadn't been there before. The clearing had been empty except for that one figure. One of them moved, just a slight step forward, but in contrast to their previous stillness, it was shocking. Then another one moved, and another. Slowly, incrementally, they were all starting to move toward my truck. I threw it in drive and hit the accelerator, not caring that I was driving straight toward them. The truck lurched forward, picking up speed, and the figures didn't move out of the way. I was going to hit them, going to plow right through them, and part of me didn't care. But at the last second, they dispersed. Like smoke or fog, they just came apart, dissolving into the falling snow as if they'd never been solid at all. The truck passed through the space where they'd been standing, through wisps of cold mist that evaporated against the windshield. I kept going, bouncing back down the access road toward Route 1A. I didn't slow down, didn't look back. The branches tore at the truck and trailer, and I could hear things breaking and scraping, but I didn't care. I just needed to get back to the main road, to something familiar even if it was cursed. The access road seemed longer now, twisting and turning in ways I didn't remember from before. But eventually, I saw pavement ahead and burst out onto Route 1A in a spray of snow and gravel. I straightened the truck out and looked both ways. The abandoned white semi was nowhere in sight. The road ahead was empty, just snow and darkness and that endless white line leading north. I checked the GPS. 5 miles to Harbor's End. I didn't believe it, but I started driving anyway because what else was I going to do? Stop and wait for those figures to coalesce out of the snow again? Keep searching for side roads that led to dead ends and impossible houses? No, I was going to drive. I was going to keep my foot on the accelerator and my eyes on that white line, and I was going to drive until I either reached Harbor's End or ran out of road or went completely insane. The snow was falling harder again, and the wind had returned with renewed fury. The truck rocked and swayed, the load in the trailer shifting dangerously. I could hear things breaking back there, expensive pharmaceuticals that I was supposed to deliver intact. The company would probably fire me. I didn't care. 4 miles, 3 miles, 2 miles. The road was descending now, dropping back down toward the coast. I could hear the ocean again, the crash of waves against frozen rocks. The sound was almost comforting in its normality. Waves were real, the ocean was real. These were things that existed in the normal world. 1 mile to Harbor's End. I could see lights ahead now, real lights, street lights and building lights, the warm glow of civilization. I wanted to cry with relief. The road leveled out, and suddenly I was driving through the outskirts of town. Buildings on both sides, closed for the night but undeniably real. A gas station, a grocery store, a hardware store. Normal things, real things. The GPS announced that I'd reached my destination. I pulled into the warehouse parking lot, which was lit up like midday under sodium vapor lights. There was a guard shack by the entrance, and a man in uniform came out to check my paperwork. "Rough night?" he asked, looking at the damage to my truck. "You have no idea," I said. My voice sounded strange, rough and strained. He checked my delivery order and waved me through to the loading dock. I parked and sat there for a moment, just breathing, letting the reality of the warm lights and solid buildings sink in. I'd made it. I was safe. I climbed out of the cab and walked around to the trailer. The damage was worse than I'd thought. Deep gouges in the sides like something with claws had raked across it. Several panels were dented or torn, but it was still intact, still sealed. The warehouse crew started unloading while I filled out the paperwork. They didn't comment on the damage, and I didn't explain it. What would I say? That I'd driven through a ghost forest where faceless figures watched me from the snow? They'd think I was crazy. Hell, I thought I was crazy. But when I signed the delivery confirmation, I noticed the date stamp. February 16th, 11:47 p.m. I'd left the depot on February 15th at around 6 p.m. According to my watch and the truck's computer, I'd been driving for maybe 6 hours, 7 at most, but somehow I'd lost an entire day. Somewhere on that frozen coastal route, 24 hours had just disappeared. I thought about mentioning it to someone, but what good would that do? I had no proof, no evidence, just my word and a damaged trailer and a persistent feeling that something terrible had happened, even though I couldn't quite remember what. The crew finished unloading, and I signed the final paperwork. The warehouse manager told me I could park the truck and get some sleep in the driver's lounge before heading back. I thanked him and moved the truck to the designated area, but I didn't sleep. I sat in the lounge with a cup of bad coffee, watching the snow fall outside the window, trying to process what I'd experienced. The faces frozen in the ice wall, the impossible house with its phantom occupants, the figures that dispersed like smoke. Were they real? Or had I experienced some kind of psychological break brought on by exhaustion and isolation? I'd heard stories about truckers who drove too long without sleep and started hallucinating, seeing things that weren't there. Maybe that's all this was. But it had felt real. The cold, the fear, the overwhelming sense of wrongness. You didn't imagine things that vividly, did you? I pulled out my phone and searched for information about Route 1A. There wasn't much. It was designated a scenic route, recommended for summer travel but considered dangerous in winter. There were a few mentions of accidents over the years, mostly weather-related. Nothing about disappearances or anomalies. I searched for the abandoned white truck I'd seen. Nothing came up. I tried different search terms, different combinations. Still nothing. Then I searched for truckers who'd disappeared on coastal routes. The results made my blood run cold. There were dozens of cases. Drivers who'd started a coastal run and never arrived. Trucks found abandoned on the side of the road with no sign of the driver. Logbooks with increasingly erratic entries that suddenly stopped. One article from 2011 mentioned a driver named Marcus Webb who'd disappeared on Route 1A during a February snowstorm. His truck was found at a rest stop, covered in ice, with a logbook open to the last entry. Can't find the road. Keep going in circles. The voices won't stop. Webb, the same name that had been on the logbook I'd found. But this article was from 2011. The entry I'd seen was dated 2017, unless I'd misread the date. Unless my memory was playing tricks on me, scrambling details, trying to make sense of the impossible. I put my phone away and stared at my coffee. It had gone cold. I didn't remember how long I'd been sitting there. The warehouse manager poked his head into the lounge. "You okay, buddy? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." "Get some rest," he said. "Storm's supposed to break by morning. You'll have clear roads back." Back. He wanted me to drive back down Route 1A. Back through whatever I'd escaped. The thought filled me with a terror so complete I couldn't breathe. "Is there an alternate route?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe inland?" He shrugged. "Sure, but it'll add 3 hours to your drive. Company probably won't approve the extra fuel." "I'll pay for it myself," I said. He gave me a strange look but didn't argue. "Suit yourself. I'll write up the route for you." I waited while he printed out directions for an inland route that would take me south without touching the coast. It was longer, more complicated, passing through smaller towns and secondary highways, but it avoided Route 1A entirely. I thanked him and headed back to my truck. The snow had stopped and the sky was clearing. Dawn wasn't far off. I could see the first hint of gray on the eastern horizon. I did my pre-trip inspection, checking everything twice. The truck was damaged but roadworthy. I'd deal with the company's questions about it later. Right now, I just wanted to get moving. I pulled out of the warehouse lot and followed the manager's directions, heading west instead of south. Away from the coast, away from the ocean, away from Route 1A. As I drove, the sun started to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Normal colors. Real colors. The world looked solid again. Ordinary. The nightmare of the previous night began to feel distant, like something that had happened to someone else. But I knew I'd never forget it. Never forget the sound of those voices calling for help. Never forget the figures without faces pointing at me from the snow. Never forget the feeling of being trapped on a road that looped back on itself, unable to escape. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I'd never drive Route 1A again. Not in winter, not in summer, not ever. Whatever was out there on that frozen coastline, it could stay there without me. I got back to the depot 36 hours after I'd left. The company was pissed about the damaged trailer and the extra fuel costs, but they couldn't prove I'd done anything wrong. I told them I'd gotten caught in the storm and had to take an alternate route to avoid dangerous conditions. Which was true, technically. They docked my pay for the damages and put a note in my file. I didn't care. I was just glad to be back. Glad to be alive. Glad to be somewhere with other people and noise and normalcy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me back. Nothing I could point to, nothing obvious. Just a persistent sense of being watched. Of shadows moving at the edge of my vision. Of voices murmuring just below the threshold of hearing. I started having trouble sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back on that road, driving through the snow, watching mile markers count backward. I'd wake up gasping, convinced I could hear waves crashing and wind howling. I saw a doctor. He prescribed sleeping pills and suggested therapy. I went to 3 sessions before giving up. How could I explain what I'd experienced? The therapist would think I was delusional. Hell, I thought I was delusional. But the dreams didn't stop, and they got worse. More vivid, more detailed. I started dreaming about the house in the clearing, walking through its rooms, finding things I hadn't seen during my brief time there. Messages scratched into walls. Names carved into floorboards. Dozens of names, maybe hundreds, all different drivers who'd taken the same route and never made it out. In the dreams, I could hear their voices clearly. They were the ones calling for help on that frozen road. They were the ones trapped inside the ice wall, pressing against it, trying to break free. They were the figures in the long coats, waiting in the snow, searching for someone to take their place. And every dream ended the same way. I'd be driving again on Route 1A, heading north toward Harbor's End. But this time, I wouldn't make it. This time, I'd become one of them. Another voice calling for help. Another figure standing in the snow, waiting for the next driver who made the mistake of stopping. I quit the company 3 months later. Told them I was done with the long-haul driving, that I wanted something local. They were happy to accommodate. I'd been a reliable driver, and they valued that. They gave me a position doing local deliveries, short runs that never took me more than 50 miles from the depot. It helped. The nightmares became less frequent when I wasn't spending hours alone on dark highways. I started sleeping better, eating better. I even started dating someone, a woman I met at a diner who didn't ask too many questions about why a long-haul trucker had given it all up. But I still couldn't drive past the ocean without feeling it. That pull, like something out there was calling my name. like unfinished business was waiting for me on that frozen coastline. I started avoiding coastal areas entirely, took different routes, added time to my drives, just to stay inland. My boss noticed, but didn't comment. I was doing my job, making my deliveries. What did it matter how I got there? 6 months after that night, I was making a delivery to a warehouse in northern Massachusetts. It was supposed to be simple. Pick up a load of auto parts and bring them back to the depot. I'd done it a dozen times before, but when I got to the warehouse, the foreman told me there'd been a change. They needed the parts delivered to a different location, a coastal town about an hour north. He showed me the address, Harbor's End. I stared at the paper, my hands starting to shake. "I can't," I said. "I can't go there." The foreman frowned. "What do you mean you can't? It's just a delivery." "I can't," I repeated, hearing the panic in my own voice. "Please. Anywhere else. I'll take it anywhere else." He looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was. "Look, buddy, I don't know what your problem is, but this is the delivery. You don't want to do it. I'll call your company and they can send someone else." I almost said yes, almost told him to call and get a different driver. But I knew what that would mean. Questions I couldn't answer. Maybe losing my job. And for what? Because I was afraid of a road? I took the paper from him with shaking hands. "I'll do it," I said. The drive north was torture. Every mile felt like a countdown to something terrible. I tried to convince myself it would be fine. I'd be taking a different route this time, a main highway that ran parallel to the coast but never actually touched it. I wouldn't have to drive Route 1A. I wouldn't have to face whatever was waiting there. But as I got closer, I realized the main highway was closed for construction. There was a detour sign, pointing toward a smaller road. A coastal road, Route Way. I pulled over, my heart hammering. I couldn't do this. I couldn't drive that road again. But the only alternative was to turn around, go back, admit defeat. And something about that felt wrong. Like I'd be running from a problem that would never go away unless I faced it. So I drove. I merged onto Route 1A, heading north, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn back. The road looked different in daylight. Ordinary. Just a normal coastal highway with scenic views of the ocean. I passed the spots where I'd seen the clothing hanging from posts, but there was nothing there now. Just empty reflector posts marking the edge of the pavement. I passed the rest area where I'd found the abandoned truck. It was empty, just a gravel lot with some trash cans and a portable toilet. No truck, no ice, no voices. Everything looked completely normal. I started to relax. It had been the storm, I told myself. The darkness and the snow and my own exhaustion. I'd hallucinated the whole thing. There was nothing supernatural about this road. It was just a road. But then I came around a curve and saw it. The access road leading to the clearing. The gap in the trees where I'd turned off, desperate to escape the loop I'd been trapped in. I drove past it, my eyes locked straight ahead, refusing to look. But in my peripheral vision, I could see something standing at the entrance to that access road. Something in a long, dark coat, pointing at me as I passed. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. I just kept driving, my heart racing, my hands shaking. Harbor's End was only a few miles ahead. I could make it. I could deliver the load and get the hell out of here and never come back. The town appeared ahead, exactly as I remembered it. The warehouse was easy to find. I pulled in, made the delivery, signed the paperwork. The whole process took maybe 20 minutes, and then I had to drive back. I sat in the parking lot for a long time trying to work up the courage. The sun was setting. In another hour, it would be full dark, and I knew with absolute certainty that driving Route 1A at night was a very bad idea. I called my boss and told him I needed to stay overnight, that the delivery had taken longer than expected. He wasn't happy, but he agreed. I found a cheap motel on the edge of town and checked in, grateful for the fluorescent lights and thin walls and sounds of other people moving around. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the ocean in the distance. Somewhere out there on that frozen coastline, something was waiting. I could feel it, like a pressure at the back of my skull. Morning came eventually. I checked out of the motel and got back on the road, heading south on Route 1A in the early dawn light. The ocean was calm, almost peaceful. The sky was clear. Everything looked normal and safe and ordinary. I made it about 20 miles before I saw them. Figures standing at the side of the road, dressed in long, dark coats, perfectly spaced at regular intervals. I counted 11 of them before I stopped counting. They were all facing the road, all watching as I drove past. And though I couldn't see their faces clearly at this distance, I knew what I would find if I stopped and looked closely. Nothing. Just blank ice where their features should be. I kept driving, fighting the urge to speed up, to run. They couldn't hurt me as long as I stayed on the road, as long as I kept moving. That's what I told myself. But one of them moved. As I passed, it turned its head to follow my progress. Then another one moved, and another. By the time I was past them all, they were all turned around, all watching me drive away. In my rearview mirror, I could see them starting to walk. Not toward me, but in the same direction I was traveling. Following me. Matching my speed even though I was doing 60 and they were on foot. I pressed the accelerator harder. 70, 80. The truck wasn't designed for this kind of speed, especially not on these roads, but I didn't care. I had to outrun them. Had to put distance between myself and whatever those things were. The speedometer hit 90. The truck was shaking, the trailer swaying dangerously. I was going to lose control, going to crash, but I couldn't slow down. The figures in my mirror were keeping pace, gliding over the pavement like they were skating on ice. Then, abruptly, they stopped. All of them at the same moment, like they'd hit an invisible barrier. They just stood there in the middle of the road, watching me pull away. I slowed down to a more reasonable speed, my heart still pounding. I'd crossed some kind of boundary, some line that they couldn't or wouldn't cross. I was safe, for now. I made it back to the depot without any other incidents. I turned in the truck, filed my reports, and went home. I didn't mention the figures on the road. What would I say? But I dream about them now, every night. I dream that I'm driving Route 1A, and they're waiting for me. More of them each time. And every dream they get a little closer, a little more real. I've stopped taking jobs that go anywhere near the coast. I've told my boss I have a medical condition that makes coastal driving dangerous. He accepted it without question, probably because I've never given him trouble before. But I know it's only a matter of time. Sooner or later, there will be a delivery I can't refuse, a route I can't avoid, and I'll find myself back on that frozen coastline, driving through the darkness, watching for figures in long coats. Maybe next time I won't make it out. Maybe next time I'll become one of them, another lost driver standing at the side of the road, waiting for the next person who makes the mistake of stopping to help. Or maybe I'm already one of them, and I just don't know it yet. Maybe I died on that road back in February, and everything since has been a dream. A dying hallucination as I freeze to death in an abandoned truck covered in ice. I don't know anymore. I don't know what's real and what isn't. All I know is that I still drive. Every day I get in a truck and I drive. And every night I dream of that frozen coastline and the voices calling for help and the figures without faces pointing at me from the snow. And every morning I wake up wondering if this is the day I'll have to go back. The day I'll finally finish what I started on Route 1A. The day I'll find out what really happened to all those other drivers. The day I'll become another mystery, another abandoned truck, another name carved into the floorboards of that impossible house in the clearing. I still have the piece of paper with Harbor's End's address on it. I don't know why I kept it. I should have thrown it away, burned it, destroyed it. But it's in my glove compartment, and sometimes when I'm stopped at a red light or waiting to load, I take it out and look at it. And I feel that pull again, that sense of unfinished business, like there's something I left behind on that frozen coastline, something I need to go back for. I don't know what it is, but I know that someday I'll find out. Someday I'll go back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. Route 1A is waiting for me. It's always waiting. And when I finally answer its call, I don't think I'll be coming back. I've been hauling freight up and down the East Coast for nearly 12 years now, and in that time, I've learned to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is wrong. That's a lesson you learn quick in this business, or you don't last long. This particular run started normal enough. It was early October, that time of year when the coastal weather can't decide if it wants to be summer or fall. I was driving a load of construction equipment from Portland down to a job site in Kittery, nothing special. The route was one I'd done dozens of times before, mostly following the old coastal highway that runs parallel to Route Me. I left Portland around 3 p.m., planning to make the delivery by 6 and be home in time for dinner. My wife had been on me about missing too many family meals, and I'd promised her I'd make this one. The load was secured, the truck was running smooth, and I had a full tank of diesel. Everything was perfect. The first hour passed without incident. The weather was clear, temperature in the low 60s, light traffic. I had the windows down and the radio playing classic rock, just cruising along and enjoying the ride. This was the part of the job I actually liked, when everything was going right and you could just focus on the road ahead. Around 4:30, I started looking for a place to grab coffee. There's a truck stop I usually hit about 40 miles south of Portland, right off the highway. Good coffee, clean bathrooms, and they don't give you grief about parking. But when I got there, the place was packed. Every parking spot taken, trucks lined up 3 deep at the fuel pumps. Some kind of convention or something must have been in town. I decided to skip it and push on. There were other places up ahead, smaller stops that the locals used. I could grab coffee at one of those and still make my delivery on time. That's when I saw the sign. It was old, faded, the kind of painted wood sign that looks like it's been standing since the 1960s. Harborview Truck Stop, 2 miles. An arrow pointed down a side road that branched off to the right. I didn't remember seeing that sign before, but then again, I usually stopped at the regular place and never needed to look for alternatives. Maybe I'd just never noticed it. The side road looked paved and well-maintained, so I figured why not. 2 miles wasn't far, and a smaller stop would probably be less crowded. I took the turn and followed the road as it wound through a stretch of pine forest. The trees here grew thick and close, their branches forming a canopy overhead that blocked out most of the afternoon sun. The road was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass, and there were no center lines painted on the asphalt. After about a mile, the trees thinned out, and I caught glimpses of water through the gaps. The ocean, I assumed, though the angle was wrong for where I thought I was. The road curved to follow the shoreline, and I could hear waves crashing against rocks somewhere below. Then I saw the truck stop. It sat in a clearing maybe 100 yards from the road, a low, cinder-block building with a rusted metal roof and a gravel parking lot. There were no other vehicles in sight. The windows were dark, and I couldn't see any lights on inside. But the sign out front said, Open 24 HRS, in red letters that were still clearly visible despite the weathering. And there was a Coca-Cola vending machine by the entrance that looked relatively new, its display panel glowing bright red in the fading light. I pulled into the parking lot, my tires crunching on the gravel. The place looked rough, but not abandoned. The building's paint was peeling and there were rust stains running down from the roof, but the lot was clear of debris and the front door looked intact. I parked and sat for a moment, looking the place over. Something about it felt off, though I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. Maybe it was just the isolation, the way it sat there alone in that clearing, with nothing else around for miles. Or maybe it was the silence. Even with my engine running, I couldn't hear anything. No traffic noise from the main road, no birds, nothing. I checked my watch, 4:47 p.m. I still had plenty of time to grab coffee and make my delivery. I killed the engine and stepped down from the cab. The air smelled like salt and seaweed, that distinctive ocean smell that's stronger in the fall when the water gets cold. The wind was picking up, blowing in off the water, and I could hear it whistling through the trees behind the building. But still, no other sounds. No voices, no music from inside. Nothing that suggested anyone was actually here. I walked across the gravel to the front door. There was a closed sign hanging in the window, but it was facing inward, which meant the place was supposed to be open. I pushed on the door and it swung inward easily, a small bell tinkling as I entered. The interior was dimly lit by sunlight filtering through dirty windows. It was a typical truck stop layout. A small convenience store area with a few aisles of snacks and supplies, a counter with an old cash register, and a coffee station along the back wall. Everything looked old but functional, like it had been here for decades without much updating. But something was wrong with the details. The merchandise on the shelves was arranged too neatly, too perfectly. The coffee station had 3 full pots sitting on the burners, steam rising from them like they'd just been brewed. The lights were off, but the coffee makers were on. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed strangely in the empty space. "Anybody here?" No response. I waited, listening, but there was no sound of movement from the back rooms. Nobody was here. The place was completely empty. I walked over to the coffee station, my boots squeaking on the linoleum floor. The coffee in the pots looked fresh, and when I held my hand over one of them, I could feel heat radiating from the burner. Someone had been here recently. They had to have been. I looked around for a bell or button to call for service, but there was nothing. The counter was empty except for the cash register and a small display of lighters and air fresheners. Behind it, I could see a doorway leading to what looked like a back office or storage area. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. "Anyone back there?" Still nothing. I was starting to get that prickly feeling on the back of my neck, the one that tells you something isn't right. But I'd come this far, and I really did want that coffee. I grabbed a large cup and filled it from one of the pots. The coffee was hot and fresh, smelling rich and strong, perfect. I carried it to the counter and waited, expecting someone to emerge from the back. After a full minute of standing there, I called out one more time. "I need to pay for this coffee." Silence. I set a $5 bill on the counter, way more than enough for a cup of coffee, and turned to leave. That's when I noticed the logbook sitting on the counter next to the register. It was open to a page dated today, October 14th. There were several entries, all time-stamped earlier in the afternoon. Different truckers who'd stopped in, their company names and license plate numbers neatly recorded in blue ink. The handwriting was precise, almost mechanical in its uniformity. But what caught my eye was the last entry. It was dated 4:45 p.m., just a few minutes before I'd arrived. The company name was listed as Northway Logistics, and the license plate number was mine. I stared at it, my coffee forgotten in my hand. That wasn't possible. I'd never been here before. I'd never even heard of this place until I saw that sign 20 minutes ago. And yet there was my information, written in that same precise handwriting, as if I'd already stopped here and left. I flipped back through the pages looking at the earlier dates. October 13th, October 12th, going back weeks. The handwriting was always the same, the entries always perfectly spaced and aligned. But the dates were wrong. According to the calendar on my phone, today was October 14th. But some of these entries were dated October 15th, October 16th, days that hadn't happened yet. I closed the logbook and backed away from the counter, my heart starting to race. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. I needed to get out of here. I turned toward the door and saw that it was closed. I didn't remember closing it. I'd pushed it open when I came in and left it that way. But now it was shut tight, and through the window I could see that the closed sign was facing outward. I walked over and tried the handle. It turned, but the door wouldn't budge. It felt like something was pushing against it from the outside, holding it shut. I put my shoulder into it and shoved, and suddenly it flew open so fast I nearly fell out onto the gravel. I caught myself and looked back at the building. The door was open now, swinging gently in the breeze. The closed sign was facing inward again. Everything looked exactly as it had when I'd arrived. Except now I could see someone standing in the window, a silhouette, backlit by the dim interior light, watching me. They were perfectly still, not waving or moving, just standing there. I didn't go back inside to ask questions. I walked quickly to my truck, got in, and started the engine. My coffee was still in my hand, and I set it in the cup holder as I put the truck in gear. The liquid inside was ice cold, like it had been sitting there for hours instead of minutes. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed back toward the main road, checking my rearview mirror every few seconds. The truck stop receded behind me, and I could still see that figure standing in the window, watching me leave. The road through the trees seemed longer than I remembered. I drove for what felt like 10 minutes before I finally saw the main highway ahead. When I merged back onto it, I checked my odometer. I'd driven 4.3 miles, more than twice the distance the sign had advertised. I pulled over at the first rest area I found and sat there for a while, trying to calm down. My hands were shaking, and I felt cold despite the warm afternoon air. I looked at the coffee in my cup holder. It was still ice cold, and now that I looked at it closely, the liquid inside looked wrong. Too dark, almost black, with an oily sheen on the surface. I poured it out the window and watched it splash onto the pavement. It left a stain that looked almost purple in the light, and it smelled like nothing. Not like coffee, not like anything. Just nothing. I checked my watch, 5:03 p.m. According to the time, only 16 minutes had passed since I'd left Portland, but I'd driven for at least an hour, maybe more. The numbers didn't make sense. I pulled out my phone and searched for Harborview Truck Stop. Nothing came up. No website, no reviews, no listings in any directory. I tried different variations of the name, adding the route number and the town. Still nothing. According to my phone, the place didn't exist. But I'd been there. I'd walked inside, poured coffee, seen the logbook with my information already written in it. That had been real. I sat there for another 10 minutes, trying to decide what to do. I could go back and try to find it again, maybe take pictures or video as proof. But the thought of driving down that tree-lined road again, of seeing that figure in the window, filled me with a dread so intense I felt sick. Or I could just forget about it. Make my delivery, go home, tell my wife I'd had a weird experience, but nothing serious. Chalk it up to fatigue or low blood sugar or some other rational explanation. That's what I decided to do. I pulled back onto the highway and continued south toward Kittery. I made my delivery right on time, signed the paperwork, and headed home. I was only 20 minutes late for dinner, and my wife didn't even mention it. But I couldn't stop thinking about that truck stop, the coffee pots that were on with no one there to brew them, the logbook with my information already entered before I'd arrived, the figure in the window, watching me leave. And the more I thought about it, the more details came back to me. Details I hadn't consciously noticed at the time, but that my brain had apparently recorded anyway, like the dust on the shelves. It had been thick, coating everything, the kind of dust that accumulates over months or years of neglect. But the products themselves had been clean, like someone had wiped them down recently while leaving everything else untouched. Or the coffee pots. They'd been plugged into a power strip on the floor, not the wall outlets. And the power strip's light had been off, like it wasn't even turned on. So where was the electricity coming from to keep those burners hot? And the floor. I'd heard my boots squeaking on the linoleum, heard them clearly in the silence. But when I'd looked down, I'd been walking on carpet, old, stained carpet that didn't match the linoleum I'd seen when I first entered. These inconsistencies piled up in my mind, each one making the experience feel less like a simple misunderstanding and more like something fundamentally wrong. Like I'd stepped into a place that wasn't quite real, or that existed in some space between real and not real. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept dreaming about the truck stop, about walking through its aisles while that figure watched me from the window. In the dreams, I could see its face, or where its face should have been, but there was nothing there, just a smooth blank surface like a mannequin. The next morning, I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a weird, isolated truck stop that didn't have internet presence. Plenty of small businesses, especially old ones, didn't bother with websites or online listings. The logbook thing was probably just a coincidence. Maybe an old entry I'd misread in the dim light. And the figure in the window could have been anyone. The owner, another customer, a reflection of something outside. I had 3 more runs scheduled that week, all on different routes that didn't go anywhere near that coastal highway. I was grateful for that. I didn't want to see that sign again. Didn't want to be tempted to turn down that road and see if the place was still there. But on Friday, my dispatcher called with a last-minute job. Emergency run, double pay, had to go right away. The route took me past Portland, down the same coastal highway I'd driven the previous Monday. I thought about refusing it, making up an excuse, saying I wasn't feeling well or the truck needed maintenance, but the money was good, and we needed it. My daughter's college tuition was due next month and we were short. So I took the job. And I promised myself that I wouldn't look for that sign, wouldn't let my eyes wander to the side roads as I drove past. I'd stay focused on the highway, make my delivery, and come straight home. But of course, I looked. How could I not? As I approached the area where I thought I'd seen the sign, I found myself slowing down, scanning the roadside for that faded wooden marker. It wasn't there. The road was there. I recognized it by the distinctive curve and the thick stand of pines at the entrance, but there was no sign. Just an unmarked side road that could have led anywhere. I should have kept driving. Every rational thought in my head told me to keep going, to not turn down that road, to not look for something I'd be better off never finding. But I turned anyway. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Or some compulsion I couldn't name. I just knew I had to see if it was still there, if any of it had been real. The road looked the same, winding through the trees, narrow and dark even in the midday sun. I drove slowly, watching the odometer, counting off the miles. 1 mile, 2 miles. The trees began to thin, and I could see water through the gaps. And there it was, the truck stop, sitting in that same clearing, looking exactly as I remembered it. The cinder block building with the rusted roof, the gravel lot, the vending machine glowing by the entrance. But this time, there were other vehicles in the lot. 3 trucks, all older models, all parked in a neat row facing the building. None of them had anyone in the cabs. They just sat there, empty and silent. I pulled in and parked next to them, leaving my engine running. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the building. The sign still said Open 24 HRS. The windows were still dark, and I could still feel that wrongness radiating from the place, like a frequency just below the range of hearing. I got out of my truck and walked over to one of the other vehicles. It was a 2003 Freightliner, covered in road dust but otherwise in good condition. I looked in the driver's side window. The cab was neat and clean, the keys still in the ignition. A thermos sat in the cup holder and there was a jacket draped over the passenger seat. It looked like the driver had just stepped out for a minute and would be right back. Except the layer of dust on the hood told a different story. This truck had been sitting here for a long time. I checked the other two trucks. Same thing. Both looked like they'd been recently parked and abandoned, but the dust and the flat tires said they'd been here for months, maybe longer. I walked to the front of the building, my boots crunching loudly on the gravel. The sound seemed too loud in the unnatural silence. Even the wind had died down, leaving everything still and quiet. The door was closed, the sign facing outward this time. I reached for the handle and pulled. The door opened easily, that same small bell tinkling as it had before. The interior looked different in the daylight coming through the windows. I could see the details more clearly now. The products on the shelves were old, brands I recognized from my childhood. Some of them didn't even exist anymore. But they looked new, pristine, like they'd just been stocked. The coffee pots were still on the burners, still steaming. I walked over and checked them. The coffee looked fresh, and when I touched the side of one of the pots, it was hot. "Hello?" I called out, knowing there wouldn't be an answer but feeling compelled to try anyway. "Is anyone here?" The silence that followed was complete. Not even the sound of my own breathing seemed to penetrate it. I stood there waiting, and that's when I noticed the smell. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible. But as I stood there, it got stronger. It smelled like the ocean, but wrong somehow. Like seawater that had been sitting in a closed container for too long, growing stale and thick. I backed toward the door, my eyes scanning the aisles and the counter area. That's when I saw the logbook again. It was sitting in the exact same spot, open to the exact same page. I walked over and looked at it, already knowing what I'd find. And there it was. Another entry for today, Friday, October 18th. My company name, my license plate number, time-stamped at 12:34 p.m., 15 minutes before I'd actually arrived. But this time, there was something else. Below my entry, in that same mechanical handwriting, someone had written, "Did not leave, still here." I stared at those words for what felt like forever, my brain trying to process what they meant. Did not leave, still here, but I had left. I'd driven away on Monday, made it home safely, lived 4 normal days since then. I wasn't still here. Unless this entry wasn't about me, unless it was about someone else who'd stopped here. Someone who matched my vehicle description. Someone who hadn't made it out. I flipped through the logbook again, going back through the pages. The entries went back for months, maybe years. Hundreds of trucks, all listed with the same precise detail. Company names I recognized, some I didn't. License plates from states all across the country, and under many of them in that same handwriting, "Did not leave, still here." I counted them as I flipped through. 47 entries with that notation. 47 trucks that had supposedly never left this place. I thought about the 3 trucks sitting in the parking lot outside. Where were the other 44? A sound from the back of the building made me jump. It was faint, barely audible, but definitely real. a scraping sound like something being dragged across a floor. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. "Is someone back there?" The scraping stopped. Then came footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the back room toward the front counter. I backed away, putting the counter between myself and whatever was coming. A door I hadn't noticed before swung open, and a man emerged. He was old, maybe 70, with gray hair and a weathered face that looked like it had spent a lifetime in the sun. He was wearing work clothes, jeans, and a flannel shirt, both stained with oil and grease. He smiled when he saw me, a wide, friendly smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry about that," he said, his voice rough and gravelly. "Was doing inventory in the back. Didn't hear you come in." I stared at him, trying to reconcile his appearance with the abandoned feeling of the place. I called out," I said, "several times." "These old ears don't work like they used to," he said, tapping the side of his head. "What can I do for you?" "I just wanted coffee," I said, even though that wasn't true anymore. What I wanted was to leave, to get back in my truck and never come near this place again. But I was just leaving. "Already poured yourself a cup, I see," he said, nodding toward a coffee station. I looked back and saw a full cup sitting there on the counter, steam rising from it. I hadn't poured any coffee, I was sure of it. But there it was. I started to say, but he cut me off. "That'll be $2, he said, still smiling that wrong smile. "Or you can trade for it." "Trade? Sure. Information for coffee. Fair deal, don't you think?" I didn't think it was a fair deal at all. I wanted to grab that cup, throw money on the counter, and get out. But something about his tone made me pause. What kind of information? "Simple question," he said, leaning against the counter. "How'd you find this place?" "There was a sign," I said. "On the main highway, 2 miles back." He nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he already knew. "And you came here before, didn't you? Earlier this week?" "Monday," I admitted. "But I left. I made it home fine." "Did you?" he asked, and there was something in his voice that made my blood run cold. "Are you sure about that?" "Of course I'm sure. I've been working all week, making deliveries, spending time with my family." "Have you talked to them?" he interrupted. "Your family, I mean. Have you actually talked to them, or have you just gone through the motions?" I started to answer, to tell him that, of course, I'd talked to them, but the words stuck in my throat. Because, now that I thought about it, I couldn't remember any specific conversations from the past 4 days. I remembered being home, eating dinner, watching TV. But when I tried to recall what my wife had said, what my daughter had talked about, there was just nothing. Blank spaces where the details should have been. "I talk to them every day," I said, but my voice sounded uncertain even to my own ears. "Do you?" he asked. "Or do you just remember talking to them?" Memory's a funny thing, friend. Sometimes we remember what we want to remember, not what actually happened. "What are you saying?" I demanded, anger mixing with my fear. "That I've been here for 4 days? That's insane. My truck's been moving. I've made deliveries. Have you?" He reached under the counter and pulled out a clipboard. "Because according to your company's dispatch logs, you haven't checked in since Monday afternoon. They've been trying to reach you for 4 days. They've got you listed as missing." He turned the clipboard around so I could see it. It was a printout of dispatch records, and there was my name at the top. The last entry was dated October 14th, 3:47 p.m., right around the time I'd first pulled into this parking lot. "That's not possible," I said, but I was already pulling out my phone to check. The screen showed Friday, October 18th, 12:47 p.m. I'd gotten the emergency dispatch call at 11:30, started driving at noon. The timeline made sense. Except when I checked my call log, there was no record of the dispatcher calling. In fact, there were no calls at all for the past 4 days. No texts either. My phone showed me as having no signal, no connection, since Monday afternoon. "This doesn't make sense," I whispered, staring at the phone. "This place doesn't work like the outside world," the old man said, his smile finally fading. "Time moves different here. Sometimes faster, sometimes slower. Sometimes it doesn't move at all." "What is this place?" I asked. "It's a truck stop," he said simply. "Been here since 1962. I've been running it for, well, I don't rightly remember how long anymore. 40 years? 50? It all runs together after a while." "And the other drivers?" I gestured toward the logbook. "The ones who didn't leave?" "They're still here," he said. "Most of them, anyway. Some figured it out eventually, found their way back out. But most of them—" He trailed off, looking past me toward the windows. "Most of them are still looking." I followed his gaze and saw them. Figures moving in the tree line beyond the parking lot, barely visible in the shadows. They moved slowly, purposefully, like they were searching for something they'd lost. "What are they looking for?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The way out," he said. "They know the road's there somewhere. Know it has to be. But every time they find it, it just leads them back here. After a while, they stop trying. They just wander, waiting. Waiting for what? For someone to take their place, I suppose. That's how it works. Someone comes in, someone gets to leave. The place needs to stay balanced." He looked at me appraisingly. "You came back on your own. Most don't do that. Most run away after the first visit and never return. But you came back." "I wanted to see if it was real," I said. "And now you know it is. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" I looked at the logbook, at all those entries marked "Did not leave," "Still here." Then I looked at the coffee cup sitting on the counter, still steaming despite having been there for several minutes. And I looked at the old man who'd been running this place for decades and didn't seem bothered by any of it. "I'm going to leave," I said. "I'm going to get in my truck and drive away, and I'm never coming back." He nodded slowly. "You can try. The road's right where you left it. But I should warn you, it's not that simple. This place doesn't like letting people go once they've been here twice. First visit's free, like a sample, but come back a second time, and it starts to think you belong here." "I don't belong here," I said firmly. "Neither did they," he said, nodding toward the windows and the wandering figures beyond. "But here they are anyway." I backed towards the door, keeping my eyes on him. "Thank you for the warning, but I'm leaving now." "Suit yourself," he said, that wrong smile returning. "But do me a favor, will you? When you get back to the main road, check your odometer, see how far you've driven. Might be interesting." I didn't answer. I just pushed through the door and walked quickly to my truck. The wandering figures in the tree line had stopped moving. They were all turned toward me now, watching. I couldn't see their faces clearly, but I could feel their attention like a physical weight. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. The 3 parked vehicles sat silent next to me, their absent drivers somewhere out there in the trees, still searching for a way out they'd never find. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the parking lot, onto the narrow road leading back through the forest. In my side mirror, I could see the old man standing in the doorway of the truck stop, watching me leave. He raised one hand in a lazy wave. I focused on the road ahead, on the tunnel of trees that seemed to close in tighter with each passing second. The branches overhead blocked out most of the sunlight, turning midday into twilight. I turned on my headlights and kept driving. 1 mile, 2 miles. The trees seemed to go on forever, thick and dark and unchanging. I should have reached the main highway by now. The sign had said 2 miles, and I'd already driven well past that. 3 miles, 4 miles. The road began to curve, winding back and forth in a way I didn't remember from before. I checked my GPS, but it showed no signal, just a blank screen with a spinning loading icon. 5 miles, 6 miles. I was definitely going the wrong direction, or the road had changed or something. But I couldn't turn around, not with the trailer. I had to keep going forward and hope I'd eventually find an intersection or a wider area where I could maneuver. The trees started to thin out, and I felt a surge of relief. Almost there. Almost back to the real world, to the highway and normal traffic and places that made sense. But when the trees finally opened up completely, I wasn't looking at the highway. I was looking at the truck stop again, sitting in its clearing exactly as I'd left it. The old man was still standing in the doorway, still smiling. I slammed on the brakes and the truck came to a stop about 50 feet from the building. This wasn't possible. I'd been driving away from this place, had put 6 miles between me and it. I couldn't have somehow circled back. I threw the truck in reverse and backed up, turning around in the clearing. I'd go back the way I came, retrace my route exactly, and figure out where I'd made the wrong turn. But when I headed back into the trees, the road was different. It curved in new directions, took turns I didn't remember seeing before. And no matter which direction I chose, no matter how many times I tried to navigate my way out, I always ended up back at that clearing, back at that truck stop, with the old man watching me from the doorway. After the 4th attempt, I gave up. I parked in the lot next to the other trucks and just sat there, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The fuel gauge showed 3/4 of a tank. I had enough diesel to keep trying, to keep searching for a way out. But the sun was setting now, even though my phone still showed it was only early afternoon. The shadows were growing longer, darker, and those wandering figures in the trees were getting harder to see as they blended with the gloom. I thought about the old man's words. Someone comes in, someone gets to leave. Was that true? Was there really a way out, but only if someone else took my place? And if so, how was I supposed to make that happen? Wait here until another driver showed up and trick them into staying? The thought made me sick. But the alternative, wandering in those trees forever, searching for a road that kept leading back to the same place, seemed worse. I got out of the truck and walked back to the building. The old man had gone inside, but I could see him through the window, standing behind the counter like he was waiting for me. I pushed open the door, and he looked up with that same smile. "Back so soon? How do I get out?" I asked directly. "What do I have to do?" "I told you," he said. "Someone has to take your place. That's the rule. But there's no one else here, just those—" I gestured toward the windows. "Those things in the trees. They were drivers once," he said. "Just like you. Just like me. They couldn't find their way out, so they stayed. After a while, they forgot what they were looking for. Now they just wander. And you? How long have you been here?" He thought about it for a moment. "I came here in 1973. Stopped for coffee just like you. Tried to leave. Couldn't find the road. Eventually, I gave up trying. The previous owner offered me a job and I took it. He left and I stayed. 50 years, I said, doing the math. You've been here for 50 years. Has it been that long?" He seemed genuinely surprised. Like I said, time moves different here. Some days feel like years, some years feel like days. After a while, you stop keeping track. But you could leave. If someone took your place, you could leave right now. He nodded slowly. I could. But where would I go? Everyone I knew is gone. The world's moved on without me. What would be the point? The point would be that you'd be free, I said. He laughed, a dry, rattling sound. Free to what? Wander around a world I don't understand anymore, looking for a life that doesn't exist. At least here, I have a purpose. I run the shop, I keep the coffee brewing, I wait for the next driver who gets lost and ends up here. It's not much, but it's something. That's insane, I said. Maybe, he agreed. But it's my insanity. I've made peace with it. He looked at me closely. Question is, can you make peace with yours? I didn't answer. I walked back outside and stood in the parking lot looking at the trees surrounding the clearing. Somewhere in there was a road, a way back to the real world. It had to exist. I'd driven it to get here. I just needed to find it again. I went back to my truck and grabbed a flashlight and a can of spray paint from the toolbox. If the road kept changing, I'd mark it. I'd leave signs so I could track where I'd been and avoid going in circles. The old man watched me from the window as I walked towards the tree line, toward the spot where the road entered the forest. I clicked on the flashlight and stepped into the shadows, spray painting an X on the first tree I passed. The road wound through the trees, and I marked every turn with an X. Left turn, X on the right. Right turn, X on the left. Straight sections, X every 100 yards. I'd create a map, a trail of breadcrumbs that would show me the way out. But after an hour of walking, of marking trees and trying to memorize the pattern of the road, I found myself back at the clearing. I hadn't turned around, hadn't doubled back. I'd walked in what should have been a straight line. But there I was, back where I'd started. And every tree I'd marked with an X was gone. The paint marks had vanished, like they'd never existed. The forest was exactly as it had been when I'd first entered it, pristine and unmarked. I tried again, this time leaving my jacket tied to a tree at the entrance to the clearing, a physical marker that couldn't disappear. I walked the road again, memorizing every detail, every distinctive tree or rock formation. An hour later, I was back at the clearing, and my jacket was hanging from a different tree on the opposite side of the clearing from where I'd left it. I tried a third time and a fourth, each attempt ending the same way. No matter what I did, no matter how carefully I navigated or how many markers I left, I always ended up back at that truck stop. The sun had set completely now, though my phone still insisted it was afternoon. The clearing was lit by a full moon that hung too large and too bright in the sky. In its light, I could see the wandering figures more clearly. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, moving through the trees in endless patterns. I sat down on the ground and put my head in my hands. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. There had to be a rational explanation, a way to understand what was going on. But there wasn't. This was a place where the normal rules didn't apply, where roads led back to where they started and time moved at its own pace, a place that trapped people and didn't let them go. The door to the truck stop opened, and the old man came out carrying 2 cups of coffee. He walked over and sat down next to me, offering me one of the cups. "Figured you could use this," he said. I took it without thinking, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. The coffee smelled good, rich and strong, but I didn't drink it, I just held it, letting the heat seep into my cold fingers. "There's no way out, is there?" I said. "There's always a way out," he said. "You just haven't found it yet. But you never found it. And all those people wandering in the woods, they never found it either." "That's true," he admitted. "But maybe you'll be different. Maybe you'll be the one who figures it out." "I doubt it," I said bitterly. We sat in silence for a while, drinking our coffee and watching the wandering figures move through the trees. The moon cast everything in silver light, making the scene look almost beautiful in a surreal, nightmarish way. "Why does this place exist?" I asked finally. "What's the purpose of all this?" "I don't know," he said. "Maybe there is no purpose. Maybe it's just a glitch, I guess you'd call it. A place where the fabric of reality got torn or folded wrong, creating a pocket that doesn't quite belong to the regular world. And we're stuck in it. For now," he said. "But who knows? Maybe someday someone will figure out how to fix it. Or maybe it'll just collapse on its own, and we'll all get spat back out into the real world." "Do you really believe that?" He shrugged. "I believe what I need to believe to get through each day, same as anyone else." I finished my coffee and stood up. "I'm going to keep trying. I'm not giving up." "Good," he said. "Hope's important. Without it, you end up like them." He nodded towards the wandering figures. "Lost and empty, just going through the motions." I walked back to my truck, climbed into the cab and started the engine. I'd rest for a few hours, then try again at dawn. Or what passed for dawn in this place. I'd keep trying, keep searching, until I found a way out or ran out of fuel or lost my mind entirely. As I settled into the driver's seat, I noticed something on the passenger side that hadn't been there before. It was a piece of paper, folded neatly, sitting on the dashboard. I picked it up and unfolded it. The handwriting was that same mechanical script from the logbook. It said, "The road changes, but the destination never does. You're looking in the wrong direction." I read the note 3 times, trying to decipher its meaning. The road changes, but the destination never does. You're looking in the wrong direction. What did that mean? I'd been trying to find the road out, retracing my path back to the highway. That was the right direction, wasn't it? Unless it wasn't. Unless the note meant that trying to leave the same way I'd come in was the wrong approach. But if not that way, then how? I looked out at the clearing at the truck stop sitting in its pool of moonlight. The old man had gone back inside, and I could see him through the window, standing behind the counter exactly as he'd been when I'd first arrived. Like he was frozen in that position, waiting eternally for the next customer. The destination never does. Never does what? Never changes? But that didn't make sense. The destination was the highway, the real world, freedom. That wasn't a fixed point that could be reached from different directions. Or was it? I thought about what the old man had said. This place was a glitch, a pocket torn from normal reality. What if it wasn't just a geographic anomaly? What if it existed in multiple places at once, or in no place at all? I grabbed my flashlight and got out of the truck. Instead of heading for the road through the trees, I walked to the far end of the clearing where the forest was thickest. There was no path here, no indication that anyone had ever walked this direction. Just dense undergrowth and closely packed trees. I pushed my way into the forest using the flashlight to navigate. Branches caught at my clothes and scratched my face. The ground was uneven, covered in roots and fallen logs. This wasn't a road, wasn't a path. It was just wilderness. But I kept going, forcing my way deeper into the trees. If the road kept changing and leading back to the truck stop, maybe the answer was to abandon the road entirely. To go in a direction that made no sense, that shouldn't lead anywhere. After about 20 minutes of struggling through the undergrowth, I broke through into a small clearing. And there, in the center of it, was a truck. It was old, maybe from the 1980s, covered in rust and moss. The tires were flat, and the hood was standing open. When I walked closer and shined my flashlight inside, I could see that the engine was completely missing. Not damaged or removed, just gone, like it had never been there in the first place. I walked around to the driver's side and looked in the window. The cab was empty except for a logbook lying on the seat. I tried the door, and it opened with the creak of protesting metal. I picked up the logbook and flipped it open. The entries were dated from 1987, tracking deliveries of auto parts and construction materials. The handwriting was different from what I'd seen at the truck stop. Looser, more personal. I flipped to the last entry. October 23, 1987. Stopped at Harborview for coffee. Can't find the road out. Been searching for 3 days. Food and water running out. Starting to see other drivers in the woods. They don't talk, just watch. I think they want me to join them. There were no entries after that. I set the logbook back on the seat and backed away from the truck. This driver had been trapped here for days, maybe weeks. Before, what? Dying? Becoming one of those wandering figures? I continued through the woods, and after another 10 minutes, I found another truck. This one was newer, probably from the early 2000s. Same story, empty cab, logbook with desperate final entries, no sign of the driver. Over the next hour, I found 6 more trucks, all abandoned, all with logbooks that told the same story. Drivers who'd stopped at Harborview, couldn't find the way out, and eventually gave up or ran out of supplies or lost their minds. But none of them had tried this direction. According to their logbooks, they'd all stayed on the road, trying to navigate their way out through the forest paths. None of them had thought to abandon the road entirely and strike out through the wilderness. Maybe that was the key. Maybe the place could only trap you if you played by its rules, if you stuck to the roads and paths it provided. But if you went in a direction it didn't expect, through terrain it hadn't mapped out, maybe you could break free. I pushed on, moving in what I hoped was a straight line away from the truck stop. The terrain got rougher, steeper. I climbed over fallen logs and ducked under low-hanging branches. My clothes were torn and I was covered in scratches, but I didn't care. I was moving in a direction that felt right, that felt like progress. Then I heard the ocean, the distant crash of waves against rocks, growing louder as I walked. I was getting close to the coast, to the edge of whatever pocket dimension this was. If I could reach the water, maybe I could follow the shoreline to a real road, a real town. I broke through the tree line and found myself standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The moon was huge overhead, turning the water silver. The waves crashed against the rocks below, sending up spray that glittered in the light. But something was wrong with the water. It wasn't moving right. The waves were too regular, too perfect, like they were on a loop. And when I looked closely, I could see that the spray wasn't falling back down. It was hanging in the air, frozen mid-flight, like someone had pressed pause on reality. I walked along the cliff edge, looking for a way down. There had to be a beach somewhere, a place where I could reach the water. But the cliff just went on, uniform and unbroken, stretching in both directions as far as I could see. I walked for what felt like hours, the cliff unchanging beside me. And then, without warning, I was back at the clearing. The truck stop sat in its pool of moonlight, exactly as I'd left it. I'd walked in a straight line away from this place and somehow ended up right back where I'd started. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to understand. It was like the clearing was the center of a sphere, and no matter which direction you traveled, you always curved back to the middle. There was no edge, no boundary, no way out. The door to the truck stop opened, and the old man emerged. He walked over to me, not hurrying, like he had all the time in the world. Which, I suppose, he did. "Found the cliffs, did you?" he asked. "The water's frozen," I said. "The waves aren't moving." "They are, just slower than you can perceive. Time works different at the edges. You could stand there and watch for a year, and you'd see one wave complete its cycle. How is that possible?" "It's not," he said, simply. "That's the point. This place isn't possible. It doesn't obey the rules of the reality you came from, so trying to navigate it using those rules won't work. Then how do I get out? I demanded, my frustration boiling over. You said someone comes in, someone gets to leave, but there's nobody else here. Just you and me and those things in the woods. That's not entirely true, he said. There's always someone coming. You just have to wait for them. How long? Hours? Days? Years? He shrugged. Depends. Sometimes a truck comes through every few days. Sometimes it's months between visits. No way to predict it. I wanted to scream, to rage at the unfairness of it all. But what good would that do? This place didn't care about fairness. It didn't care about anything. I walked back to my truck and sat in the cab, thinking. The old man had said he'd been here since 1973, 50 years. He'd taken over from whoever was running the place before him, and that person had presumably gotten out. So there was a pattern, a system. You get trapped, you wait for the next person, you leave. But I couldn't wait 50 years. I couldn't even wait 50 days. My family would think I was dead. They'd move on, build lives without me. My daughter would grow up without a father. My wife would remarry. Everything I cared about would slip away while I was stuck in this pocket dimension, brewing coffee and waiting for the next lost driver. There had to be another way. Something the old man wasn't telling me or something he didn't know himself. I thought about the note. The road changes, but the destination never does. You're looking in the wrong direction. What if the destination wasn't the highway? What if it was something else entirely? The note had appeared in my truck, which meant someone had put it there. Someone who wanted me to understand something. I got out and walked back into the truck stop. The old man was behind the counter, wiping it down with a rag, even though it was already spotless. Who left the note in my truck? I asked. He looked up, genuinely puzzled. What note? The one about the road changing. Someone put it on my dashboard. He shook his head. Wasn't me. Must have been someone else. There is no one else, I said. Just you, me, and the wanderers. Well, he said slowly, I suppose one of them could have done it. They're not completely gone, you know. Some of them still have moments of clarity, times when they remember who they were. Which one? No way to know. They all look the same after a while. I walked to the window and looked out at the figures moving through the trees. Dozens of them, maybe more, all wandering in their endless patterns. One of them had left that note. One of them had figured something out, had learned something important enough to try to communicate it. I went back outside and walked toward the nearest figure. As I got closer, I could see it was wearing the remains of a trucker's uniform, faded and torn but still recognizable. It was moving in a slow circle, its head down like it was searching for something on the ground. "Hey," I called out. "Did you leave a note in my truck?" It didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge that I'd spoken, just kept walking its circular pattern. I tried another figure and another, asking the same question. None of them responded. None of them even looked at me. They were completely lost in their own worlds, trapped in whatever loop their minds had created. But on the 7th try, something different happened. The figure stopped walking. It raised its head slowly and looked directly at me, and I could see its face clearly in the moonlight. It was me. Or rather, it looked exactly like me. Same features, same build, even wearing the same clothes I had on. "You're looking in the wrong direction," it said, its voice flat and emotionless. "The way out isn't behind you. It's ahead." "What does that mean?" I asked, my heart pounding. "You've been trying to go back," it said. "Back to the highway, back to your life, back to the way things were, but you can't go back. You can only go forward." Forward to what? To what comes next, it said. And then it turned and walked away, resuming its endless wandering pattern. I stood there trying to process what it had said. I'd been trying to retrace my steps, to undo my mistake of stopping here. But what if that wasn't possible? What if the only way out was to go deeper in, to fully commit to whatever this place was? I walked back to the truck stop and went inside. The old man looked up as I entered. I need to understand how this place works, I said. Really understand it. Not just the surface level stuff, but the mechanics of it. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right. But understanding comes with a price. Once you know how it works, you can't unknow it, and that knowledge might not help you the way you think it will. I'll take that risk, I said. He gestured for me to follow him, and he led me through the door to the back room. I'd expected a storage area or office, but what I saw stopped me in my tracks. The room was enormous, far too large to fit inside the small building I'd seen from outside. It stretched back impossibly far, filled with rows and rows of shelves. And on those shelves were things, objects I couldn't quite focus on, items that seemed to shift and change when I looked directly at them. "What is this?" I asked. "This is what the place collects," he said. "Every driver who stops here leaves something behind, even if they eventually get out. A piece of their time, their memories, their self. It all ends up here." He walked down one of the aisles, and I followed. The objects on the shelves became clearer as we moved deeper into the room. I saw watches, all stopped at different times. Photographs of people I didn't recognize. Logbooks filled with entries that contradicted each other. Pieces of vehicles, steering wheels, side mirrors, gear shifts, all arranged neatly like museum exhibits. "Why does it collect these things?" I asked. "Because that's what it is," he said. "This place isn't a truck stop that got caught in some dimensional anomaly. It's the anomaly itself, a place that exists specifically to trap travelers, to collect their stories and memories and artifacts. The truck stop is just the interface, the way it interacts with our reality." "But why?" he shrugged. "Maybe it's hungry. Maybe it's lonely. Maybe it's just following some instinct we can't comprehend. Does it matter?" We reached the end of the aisle, and he stopped in front of a shelf that held a single object. A coffee cup. It was the same kind I'd seen in the front of the store, white ceramic with the truck stop's logo on the side. "Every truck stop has a cup like this," he said. "A symbol of hospitality, of providing comfort to travelers. But this cup is different. It's the source, the anchor point that keeps this place connected to the roads outside." I looked at the cup more closely. It seemed completely ordinary, nothing special about it. But as I stared at it, I started to see things in its surface. Reflections that didn't match the room around us. Images of highways and truck stops, of drivers and vehicles, all flowing across the ceramic like scenes on a television screen. "If I destroy it?" I asked. "The place might collapse, or it might create a new anchor, or nothing might happen at all. There's no way to know without trying." I reached for the cup, but he grabbed my wrist. "Think carefully before you do this. If the place collapses while you're inside it, there's no telling where you'll end up. You might get back to your reality. You might end up somewhere worse. You might cease to exist entirely." I hesitated, my hand hovering over the cup. This could be my way out, or it could be my death. No way to know without trying. But what other choice did I have? Wait here for years until another driver showed up? Become one of those wandering figures, lost and empty? Or take a risk, destroy the anchor, and hope I'd survive whatever came next? I made my decision. I grabbed the cup and threw it against the floor as hard as I could. It shattered, pieces flying in all directions. And the moment it did, everything changed. The sound of the cup breaking was like thunder, echoing through the massive room and beyond. The shelves around me began to vibrate, and the objects on them started to move, sliding and shifting like they were trying to escape. The old man stumbled backward, his face showing the first real emotion I'd seen from him. "What have you done?" he whispered. The room began to collapse. Not physically, the walls and ceiling weren't falling, but dimensionally. I could feel the space folding in on itself, getting smaller and more compressed with each second. The aisles of shelves were squeezing together, merging into each other. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, just away from the collapsing space. The old man was shouting something behind me, but I couldn't make out the words over the sound of reality tearing apart. I burst through the door, back into the front of the truck stop. The room was shaking, coffee cups falling from shelves and shattering on the floor. The windows were cracking, spider webs of fractures spreading across the glass. I ran for the exit, throwing the door open and sprinting toward my truck. Behind me, I could hear the building groaning and creaking like it was being crushed by an invisible force. The wandering figures had stopped moving. They were all standing perfectly still, facing the truck stop, watching it destroy itself. And as I watched, they began to fade, not disappearing all at once, but slowly becoming transparent, like ghosts in the moonlight. I reached my truck and yanked open the door. The engine was still running. I'd left it on hours ago, and somehow it hadn't run out of fuel. I threw it in gear and hit the accelerator, not caring about the careful navigation I'd tried before. I just wanted distance between myself and that collapsing building. The truck lurched forward, bouncing over the rough ground. I steered toward the tree line, toward the road I'd tried so many times before. Maybe, with the anchor destroyed, the road would work properly. Maybe I could finally escape. As I entered the forest, I risked a look in my side mirror. The truck stop was folding. There's no other way to describe it. The building was collapsing in on itself, but not down or to the side. It was folding inward, into a point, like it was being sucked into a black hole at its center. The wandering figures were gone now, completely faded, and the old man was standing alone in the parking lot watching me leave. He wasn't trying to run or escape. He was just standing there, calm and accepting, as his world came apart around him. I focused on the road ahead. The trees were racing past, and for the first time they looked different with each passing second. Not the same endless repetition I'd seen before, but actual progress. I was moving forward, really moving. The road began to straighten out, and I could see light ahead. Real sunlight, not the impossible moonlight that had lit the clearing. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the truck shaking with the speed. And then I was through. The trees opened up, and I was on the main highway, with the normal traffic flowing around me. Cars honked as I merged roughly into the lane, but I didn't care. I was out. I was back in the real world. I drove for another 10 miles before I trusted myself to pull over. I parked at a rest area and sat there, hands shaking, breathing hard. I checked my phone. It showed Friday, October 18th, 1:34 p.m. Less than 2 hours had passed since I'd taken the emergency dispatch call. But that couldn't be right. I'd been at that truck stop for hours, maybe days. I'd wandered through the forest, found abandoned trucks, talked to the old man. All of that couldn't have happened in 2 hours. I called my dispatcher. He answered on the second ring, sounding annoyed. "Where the hell have you been? You were supposed to check in an hour ago." "I got lost," I said. "Took a wrong turn." "Well, get unlost and make your delivery. You're already behind schedule." I looked at the delivery order on my phone. Kittery, same as before. I checked my GPS and found I was only about 20 miles away. I could still make it. I pulled back onto the highway and drove to the delivery site, my mind churning. Had any of it been real? Or had I experienced some kind of fugue state? A hallucination brought on by stress or fatigue? But I could still feel the scratches on my face from pushing through the undergrowth. My clothes were torn in places they hadn't been before. And when I checked my pockets, I found pieces of broken ceramic, fragments of the cup I'd destroyed. I made the delivery and signed the paperwork. The warehouse manager commented on my appearance, asked if I was okay. I told him I'd had a rough drive, which was true enough. He accepted it without further questions. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about the old man. Had he survived the collapse? Was he still trapped in whatever remained of that place? Or had he finally been released, set free after 50 years? I tried searching for the truck stop again on my phone. Still nothing. No listings, no reviews, no mention of it anywhere online. I searched for the other drivers I'd found in the forest, the ones whose logbooks I'd read. Some of them appeared in missing persons databases, truckers who'd disappeared on coastal runs decades ago. But there was no indication any of them had been found. When I got home, my wife greeted me at the door with a kiss. "How was your day?" "Fine," I lied. "Normal delivery run." She didn't notice the scratches, didn't comment on my torn clothes. It was like she couldn't see them, or her mind was smoothing over the inconsistencies to create a normal memory of a normal day. I went to bed early that night, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. I felt drained, empty, like something had been taken from me that I couldn't quite identify. I dreamed about the truck stop. In the dream, I was walking through the back room again, looking at all those shelves full of collected items. But this time I saw something I'd missed before. My own watch sitting on one of the shelves, still ticking away even though the real watch was on my wrist. The old man was there too, reorganizing the shelves like nothing had happened. When he saw me, he smiled that wrong smile and said, "You can't destroy what doesn't exist in the first place. You can only change its form." I woke up, gasping, my heart racing. It was 3:47 a.m. I got out of bed and went to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. In the mirror, I could see the scratches on my cheeks and forehead were gone. My clothes, which I'd left in a torn pile in the corner, were neatly folded and undamaged. It was like the whole thing had been erased, reality rewriting itself to remove the evidence. But I remembered all of it. Over the next few weeks, I kept expecting something to happen. A call from the old man, or seeing the wandering figures in the woods along other highways, or finding that truck stop sign on a different road. But nothing came. Life went back to normal, deliveries and dinners and the ordinary routine of existence. Except, I started noticing things, small inconsistencies that most people wouldn't catch. The way time seemed to skip occasionally, jumping forward a few seconds without anyone else noticing. The way certain roads looked different each time I drove them, even though they shouldn't change. The way my logbook sometimes had entries I didn't remember writing. I mentioned it to other truckers at a rest stop one night. Casual, just making conversation. One of them, an older guy named Briggs who'd been driving for 30 years, gave me a strange look. "You been to Harborview?" he asked quietly. My blood ran cold. "You know about it?" He nodded slowly. "Stopped there once, back in night 8. Managed to get out, but it took me 3 days. When I finally made it back to the real world, only an hour had passed." He leaned in closer. "It changes you, that place. Once you've been there, you're never quite the same. You see the cracks in reality that normal people don't notice. Are there others?" I asked. "Other places like it?" "Dozens," he said, "maybe hundreds. They're everywhere if you know what to look for. Truck stops that don't appear on any map. Rest areas that only exist on certain nights. roads that lead somewhere they shouldn't. He finished his coffee and stood up. My advice? Don't look for them. And if you accidentally find one, drive past it. Don't stop, don't go inside, don't engage with it in any way. But you stopped at Harborview, I pointed out. Yeah, he said, and I've regretted it every day since. He walked away without saying goodbye. I thought about his words as I continued my route. Don't look for them. Good advice, probably. But I couldn't help wondering about those other places, those cracks in reality. Were they all like Harborview? Were there drivers trapped in them, waiting for someone to take their place? A month after my experience, I was driving through Vermont on a night run when I saw a sign. Harborview Truck Stop, 2 miles. The same faded wooden sign, the same arrow pointing down a side road. I slowed down, my heart pounding. This was impossible. I'd destroyed the anchor, watched the place collapse. It shouldn't exist anymore. But there was the sign, as real and solid as anything else. I pulled over and sat there, staring at it. I could keep driving. I could pretend I hadn't seen it. Or I could turn down that road and see if the truck stop was really there. I thought about the old man, about the wandering figures, about all those drivers whose logbooks I'd read, about Briggs, who'd spent 25 years regretting a single stop for coffee. I put the truck in gear and drove past the sign without turning. Whatever was down that road, I didn't need to see it again. Let someone else find it. Let someone else deal with whatever had reformed itself after I'd tried to destroy it. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made a mistake. That I should have gone back, should have finished what I'd started. That somewhere in that impossible space, the old man was still standing behind the counter, still smiling his wrong smile, still waiting for the next driver who'd make the mistake of stopping. And maybe, just maybe, that driver would be the one to truly end it. To find the real way out, not just for themselves, but for everyone who'd ever gotten trapped there. Or maybe the place couldn't be destroyed. Maybe it was eternal, reshaping itself whenever someone tried to end it, adapting and surviving like some kind of dimensional parasite. I don't know. I'll probably never know. All I can do is keep driving, keep making my deliveries, and try not to think about what might be waiting down the next unmarked road. But sometimes, late at night when I'm alone on an empty highway, I see things in my peripheral vision. Figures standing at the edge of the road, watching. Buildings that shouldn't be there. Signs that point to places that don't exist. And every time I see them, I have to make a choice. Stop and investigate, or keep driving and pretend I saw nothing. So far, I've always chosen to keep driving. But I know that someday, curiosity or compulsion or simple bad luck will make me stop. And when that happens, I'll find out if the old man was right. You can't destroy what doesn't exist in the first place. You can only change its form. I still have the pieces of that broken cup in my pocket. I carry them everywhere, a reminder of what I found and what I tried to do. Sometimes I take them out and look at them, and I swear I can still see reflections moving across the ceramic shards. Highways and truck stops and drivers who'll never make it home. The company wanted to give me that same route again last week. I refused it. They weren't happy, but I didn't care. I'm not going back to Vermont, not driving that highway, not giving myself the opportunity to see that sign again. Because I know if I see it, I won't be able to resist. I'll turn down that road, pull into that parking lot, walk into that building. And maybe this time, I won't get out. Maybe this time, I'll be the one standing behind the counter, smiling that wrong smile, waiting for the next lost driver who needs a cup of coffee. Maybe I already am. Sometimes I'm not sure. The days blur together, deliveries and rest stops, and endless miles of highway. My wife asks me questions, and I answer them, but I can't always remember the conversations afterward. My daughter shows me her homework, and I help her with it, but the details slip away like water through my fingers. I'm here, I'm real, I'm living my life, but there's a logbook on a counter somewhere with my name in it, time-stamped and dated, with 4 words written underneath in that precise mechanical script. Did not leave, still here. The weather report said the storm would miss us. Clear skies all the way to Bangor, the dispatcher said at 6 a.m. He was wrong. My name is Cole Hartley, and I haul refrigerated goods up the northeastern coast. 8 years of driving trucks has taught me to trust my gut over forecasts. I should have listened to that instinct. This run was simple. Frozen seafood from Portland to Bangor. 200 miles on I-95, done it dozens of times. Load up at 7 a.m., deliver by 11, home by dinner. The first hour went perfectly. Then, 20 miles south of Augusta, dark clouds rolled in from the east. Not gradual overcast, but a solid wall of storm racing toward me. I called dispatch. Thought you said the storm was tracking east. Radar shows it over the ocean, heading away from the coast, he said. Must be a glitch. 10 minutes later, the blizzard hit. Heavy, wet snow reducing visibility to almost nothing. I slowed to 30 miles per hour, but kept moving. The delivery deadline was 2 p.m. That's when I saw the sign. I-95 north closed ahead. Detour. Electronic message board, arrow pointing to an exit ramp. I took it, following the signs onto Route 3. The snow intensified, wind pushing the truck, making me fight the wheel. After 30 minutes, I realized something was wrong. The signs were leading me east toward the coast, not north to Bangor. My GPS showed Route 3 heading north. My compass said I was going east. No phone signal. The detour signs kept appearing, guiding me along a coastal route. I followed because turning around with a 53-foot trailer in a blizzard wasn't an option. Through the snow, I glimpsed the ocean to my right. Massive waves crashed against the shore, spray freezing midair into strange ice formations. After an hour, I saw another truck ahead, moving slowly through the storm. Relief flooded through me. I wasn't alone. I sped up to catch it, but no matter how fast I went, the distance remained constant. It was like we were magnetically locked at exactly the same interval. Then I noticed the tire tracks. Too fresh, too clear, despite the heavy snowfall that should have been covering them. The patterns were too perfect, the edges too sharp. I watched them curve with the road, following its path, and then, impossibly, they just ended. Right in the middle of a straight section, the tracks stopped. Not like the truck had turned off. They just terminated, as if the vehicle had been lifted straight into the air. I pulled over, staring at where the tracks ended. The truck ahead had vanished. The road stretched empty into the white curtain of snow, but there was nowhere it could have gone. No turnoffs, no side roads, just those tracks ending in the middle of the highway. I sat there, engine idling, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Tire tracks didn't just disappear. There had to be an explanation. Wind coverage. Distance miscalculation. Some optical illusion created by the storm. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. My CB radio crackled to life, even though I'd turned it off. Turn back. 2 words, flat and emotionless, distorted by heavy static. I grabbed the handset. This is Hartley. Who is this? Silence, just the hiss of static. If you can hear me, I'm on the coastal detour heading north. Do you know where this road goes? The static grew louder, punctuated by strange pops and whistles. Under it, I could swear I heard other voices, dozens of them, all talking at once but too faint to make out individual words. It sounded like a crowd murmuring in a distant room. "Hello, I need directions." The static cut out abruptly, leaving perfect silence. Then the voice returned, clearer this time. "You're on the ice coast. Turn back while you still can." The ice coast. I'd never heard of it, but the name sent a chill down my spine. I can't turn back. The road's too narrow. No delivery is worth this. Turn back. Who are you? How do you know about the road? But there was no answer. Just that hissing static again, gradually fading until the CB was completely silent. I put the truck back in gear and continued driving, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. My mouth was dry despite the cold, and I could feel my heart beating faster. Something was very wrong with this road. 20 minutes later, a town appeared through the snow. It materialized suddenly. One moment I was surrounded by forest and empty road. The next I was driving into a cluster of buildings. Old buildings from the early 1900s lined both sides of the street. A general store with faded lettering, a post office with peeling paint, a diner with a broken neon sign. There were lights in some windows, warm yellow glows that looked inviting. Smoke rose from several chimneys, but something about it felt staged, artificial, like a movie set rather than a real town. A man stood on the sidewalk watching my truck pass. He wore a heavy coat and boots, but no hat or gloves despite the freezing temperature. Snow accumulated on his shoulders and hair, but he didn't seem to notice. As I drove by, he raised one hand in greeting. The gesture was slow, deliberate, almost mechanical. I waved back and pulled over. "Can you tell me how to get back to I-95? I called out. He walked over slowly through the knee-deep snow. Each step was measured, careful. When he got close, I could see his face clearly. Maybe 60 years old, weathered complexion. But his gray eyes were what caught my attention. They seemed to look right through me, seeing something beyond what was visible. "I-95? He said, his voice rough. "You won't find that around here." I took a detour. Been following signs for over an hour. He studied me for a long moment. "What day is it?" The question caught me off guard. "Thursday, February 16th. "What year?" Now I was getting worried. 2024, are you okay?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. The expression was hollow, practiced, like he'd done it so many times it had lost all meaning. "I'm fine, but you need to leave, right now. Don't stop, don't talk to anyone else, just turn around and drive until you're back on the main highway." "I can't turn around here, the road's too narrow with my trailer." "Then back up, or unhook the trailer and leave it. I don't care how you do it, but you need to go." There was urgency in his voice now, an edge of desperation. "What's wrong with this town?" "Nothing's wrong with the town. The town's been gone for 30 years. What you're seeing isn't real." I stared at him. "You're standing right here talking to me." "I didn't say I'm not real. I said the town's not real. There's a difference." He glanced over his shoulder, checking if we were alone. "You're on a road that shouldn't exist. It appears during storms, leads people to places they don't want to go. The only way out is to turn around and go back exactly the way you came." Now that he mentioned it, I could see the inconsistencies. The buildings looked too perfect for structures abandoned 3 decades. No graffiti, no decay. The smoke from the chimneys rose straight up, unaffected by the wind. The snow around the buildings looked too evenly distributed, like it had been carefully arranged. "How long have you been here?" I asked. His eyes grew distant. "I stopped counting years ago. Time doesn't work the same here. Sometimes a day lasts a week, sometimes a week passes in an hour. And you're warning me to leave, but you can't leave yourself. I'm tethered to this place now. he said quietly. Part of it's geography. But you're not yet. You can still escape. I decided to try reversing. I backed up maybe 100 yards, and when I checked my mirror, the town was gone. Not fading, just gone like it never existed. I stopped, staring at empty road where buildings had stood moments before. My dashboard clock showed 10:47 a.m. I'd been driving 4 hours, though the route should only take 3. I put the truck in drive, looking for a place to turn around. That's when I saw the other truck again, backing up just like I had been. But the cab was empty. No driver. It was reversing fast, coming straight toward me. I threw my truck in reverse, trying to maintain distance. Then it just stopped, instantly. Sat there, motionless, in the middle of the road. I maneuvered around it carefully. The windows were covered in frost, but I could make out a dark silhouette in the driver's seat. I didn't stop to check. And then, like the town, the truck vanished from my rearview mirror. I drove for another 30 minutes, recognizing rock formations I'd passed earlier. I was retracing my route. Then I saw detour signs again, but pointing the opposite direction. I-95 north, this way. I followed them, making a careful turn. Immediately, the storm began to let up. Snow thinned, wind died, blue sky appeared. 10 minutes later, I was back on I-95, merging into normal traffic. My dashboard clock read 11:15 a.m. I'd lost over 4 hours somewhere on that detour, but it had felt like maybe 90 minutes. I called dispatch. I'm back on I-95, about 20 miles south of Bangor. What the hell happened? You were supposed to check in an hour ago. I got caught in a detour. The interstate was closed. I-95's been open all morning. There's no detour. There were signs, I insisted. Cole, I'm looking at highway cameras. No signs, no closures. You sure you're okay? I made the delivery 45 minutes late. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I tried searching my phone. Ice Coast, Maine, Phantom Roads, Route 3 detour. Nothing matched. At home, I told my wife everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked, "You're going back, aren't you?" "I don't know." "If you don't, you'll regret it forever," she said. "But I'd rather have you die trying to help people than watch you destroy yourself with guilt." 3 days later, I had another coastal run. I'd requested it deliberately, trading shifts. Another storm was forecast. My chance to find the road again. At 10 a.m., I left Portland with machine parts for Ellsworth. The storm hit hard. At the same spot, I saw them. I-95 north closed, detour. I took the exit, phone recording everything this time. Route 3 curving east. After 30 minutes, the other truck appeared ahead. I accelerated, but the distance never changed. The tire tracks ended in the middle of the road again. I recorded it all, solid proof. The CB crackled. "Turn back. You were warned. I need to understand this place. It's a loop. You'll drive until you're stuck here like the others." "What others?" "Archer has been here 37 years. I've been here, I don't remember. Time doesn't work right." The town appeared. Archer stood in his usual spot. "You came back," he said. "I need to understand." He explained everything. The storm in 1907, his truck running out of fuel, the endless attempts to escape. Other drivers trapped in the loop. Some, for decades, forgotten who they were. "Show me," I said. We walked to the edge of town. A truck passed, silent, windows frosted. "That's Mason. Been here since 1993. Doesn't talk anymore." "How many are there?" 18 trucks. Some I only see every few weeks." I asked about the CB voice. "That's Hayes. 2001. Still tries to warn newcomers. Hayes pulled up in his truck. I showed him my phone recording and explained my plan to document everything. "You really think this could help?" he asked. "It's better than driving forever." We drove together toward the ice wall at the end of the loop. It rose 20 feet high, blocking the road completely. Faces pressed against it from inside, previous drivers who'd been absorbed. "Eventually, the loop wears you down," Hayes said. "When there's nothing left, the road absorbs you into the ice." "How long?" "Depends. Archer's lasted 37 years. I've seen drivers disappear after 5. My phone buzzed, low battery. The recording showed 3 hours had passed, though it felt like 90 minutes. "Time moves different here," Hayes confirmed. I stood at the ice wall, studying the frozen faces. Then I saw writing scratched into the surface. "The loop can be broken. Find the first marker." I photographed the message and got back in my truck. Hayes and Archer joined me, and we drove back along the road, this time paying careful attention to every marker. Boot, thermos, jacket, backpack, all items from the past few decades, left by drivers who'd gotten trapped and eventually given up hope. We'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I saw something different. It was off to the side of the road, partially hidden by snow-covered brush. At first I thought it was just another rock formation, but as I got closer I realized it was deliberately constructed. A cairn, a stack of rocks about 3 feet high, carefully balanced. Unlike the other markers, this didn't look like something a trucker would carry. This was intentional, permanent, built to last. I pulled over and got out, approaching it carefully. The rocks were old, weathered by decades of exposure to salt air and storms. Some were covered in lichen, others worn smooth by wind and ice. There was something wedged into the top of the cairn, a piece of paper protected from the weather by a plastic bag that had somehow remained intact despite the years. I pulled it out and unfolded it carefully. The paper was yellowed, brittle, the writing faded but still legible. It was a note, written in shaky handwriting that suggested the author had been cold or scared, or both. "To whoever finds this, I am Arthur Briggs. I've been trapped on this road since October 1962. I've tried everything to escape. Driving faster, driving slower, turning around at different points, even abandoning my truck and walking for days. Nothing works. The road always loops back on itself. But I think I've figured something out. This place exists because we believe in it. Our collective fear and confusion give it power. It feeds on our certainty that we're trapped, our acceptance of the impossible. If enough of us could simultaneously reject it, refuse to accept that any of this is real, maybe we could break free. Not just one person, it has to be collective. The road exists in our shared nightmare. So it takes a shared awakening to end it. I'm going to try something. I'm going to drive to the end of the road and walk into the ice wall. If my theory is right, I'll pass through it because I refuse to accept that it's solid. If I'm wrong, well, I'll join the others already frozen there. If you're reading this, I failed. But maybe you can succeed where I couldn't. Find other drivers who are still aware, still thinking clearly. Convince them. Together, all at once, reject the road's reality. That's the only way out. Don't try it alone. One person's disbelief isn't enough. It has to be unanimous, simultaneous. Only then will the road lose its hold. Arthur Briggs, October 1962. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking slightly. October 1962. Over 60 years ago. This road had been trapping people for more than half a century. I showed the note to Archer and Hayes. Archer read it slowly, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he looked up at me with something that might have been hope in his eyes. "Briggs," he said quietly, I remember hearing about him. He was already frozen in the ice wall when I got here in '87, but I never knew he'd left a note. Do you think his theory is right? I asked. It's the most plausible explanation I've heard, Archer admitted. This place doesn't follow physical laws. It follows psychological ones. The rules of dreams and nightmares. If it exists because we believe in it, then collective disbelief might destroy it. But how do we convince everyone? Hayes asked. Most of the drivers have been here so long they've forgotten how to think critically. They just exist. We start with the ones who are still aware, I said. You, me, Archer, Mason, if we can reach him. That's 4. Maybe there are others. We drove back to the ice wall, and Archer started calling on the CB radio, broadcasting to anyone who could hear. Slowly, trucks began appearing. One by one, drivers pulled up and got out, gathering at the base of the wall. I counted them as they assembled. 18 in total, including us. Some looked present and aware. Others had that hollow, distant look that suggested they were only partially there, their minds worn down by endless repetition. But they were here. That was something. I figured out what Briggs meant, Archer said, addressing the group. The first marker isn't an object. It's a moment. The first time someone realized they were trapped. Time doesn't move forward here. It loops, just like the road. Every circuit, we relive the same moments, the same realizations. The road sustains itself by feeding on that moment of horror when you understand you're caught. So, how do we stop it? One of the drivers asked. We stop feeling that fear, I explained. We accept what's happened and let it go. Remove the emotional fuel the road feeds on, and we do it together, all at once. Collective acceptance, collective release. I could see doubt on their faces. Some of them had been trapped here for decades. How could they just let go of that fear, that desperation? I know it sounds impossible, I said, but think about it. What's the alternative? Keep driving this loop forever until we fade away completely? Or try something different, something that might actually work? Slowly, one by one, they nodded. We walk into the wall, Archer explained. All at once. We really believe it's not real, just a construct of our fear. And if he was wrong? Mason asked. We become part of the wall, but is that worse than driving the loop forever? We stood in a line, holding hands. 18 drivers plus me, all facing the wall together. I started all my recording devices, making sure each one had a clear view. If this worked, there would be proof. If we failed, maybe someone would find the footage. Remember, Archer said, we're not fighting the wall. We're accepting it. Accepting that we got lost, that we've been trapped, that this might be how it ends. In that acceptance, we let go of the fear. On 3, I said, squeezing the hands I held. 1. I could feel doubt creeping in from the others, their grip tightening. The wall seemed to grow larger, more solid. I pushed back against that doubt. This place exists because we believe in it. 2. I focused on acceptance. I'd gotten lost on a detour. I'd made choices that led me here. I wasn't trying to deny any of it. I was simply accepting it, releasing my attachment to what might have been. The fear drained away, replaced by a strange calm. 3! We ran forward together, hands linked, our voices rising in a collective shout that echoed off the ice. I could feel the others beside me, their presence solid and real. The wall rushed toward us. In the final instant before impact, I saw my reflection in the ice. Not afraid, but determined. Then we hit the wall. For a split second, I felt cold resistance. Then I remembered, this isn't real. I am driving on a normal road. The ice wall doesn't exist. Suddenly, I was through. I stumbled forward, alone. The others were gone. I turned back. The ice wall was solid now. Through it, I could vaguely see figures frozen in place. Archer, Hayes, Mason, and the others. They'd failed. I'd succeeded and left them behind. Or had I? I looked around. Still on the road, still in the storm. Nothing changed except I was on the wrong side of the wall. I walked forward. 10 minutes later, I saw the town, but different. Decayed, windows broken, truly abandoned. No Archer. Then I saw my truck, engine running where I'd left it. I climbed in and drove. 20 minutes later, I-95 south, 2 miles. Real signs. I merged onto the interstate. Normal traffic. I'd escaped. I called dispatch. "It's Cole. I'm on I-95 heading south." "Cole? We've had you listed as missing for 3 days. Where have you been?" 3 days. My phone showed February 19th. I'd left on the 16th. I made the delivery 3 days late. Multiple truckers were reported missing in the nor'easter. Worst coastal storm in a decade. How many others were trapped on that road right now? My phone recording had stopped. The video folder was empty, no footage of anything. And Briggs' note, when I unfolded it, the paper was blank. No proof. I'd look crazy if I told anyone. So I didn't. I went back to work, tried to forget, but I couldn't. 2 weeks passed. I tried returning to normal, but nothing felt right. I'd wake up convinced I was still on that road. My wife noticed, but stopped asking when I couldn't explain. Late at night, I searched online, found deleted forum posts from 2003, a trucker named Dale Morrison describing 6 days trapped on an ice coast road. The post was deleted. The user vanished. 2 other similar accounts, both deleted, both users gone. The road was real. I wasn't the only one. On March 3rd, I got assigned the same coastal route. I requested a different run, but we were short-staffed. The forecast was clear. I'd be fine. At 8:30 a.m., approaching the detour area, my CB crackled. "Cole. Hayes. We're still here. The road's collapsing. The ice wall's encroaching. Every circuit, there's less road. Eventually, nothing but wall. Can you escape? We've tried. Doesn't work for us. I think you took something when you passed through. Without it, the whole thing's falling apart." Guilt flooded through me. "I'm sorry. Don't. You got out, but tell people. We're going into the ice soon. If enough people know, maybe it saves others. No one believes me. I have no proof. Then come back, document everything before it's too late. If I come back, I might not leave. Probably not, but you'd be helping us. Maybe if we all go into the ice together as witnesses, the road will finally be destroyed." I thought about it all day. That night, I told my wife everything. "You're going back, aren't you?" she said. "I don't know. If you don't, you'll regret it forever. But I'd rather have you die helping people than watch guilt destroy you." We held each other. Then I started preparing. Supplies, fuel, batteries, multiple recording devices with cloud backup. The forecast showed another nor'easter on March 8th. My window. My wife wanted to come. I refused. This was something I had to do alone. We both knew it was likely goodbye. On March 8th, I kissed her one last time and headed north. The storm was building. At the exact spot, the signs appeared. I-95 north, closed, detour. I took the exit. This time, I knew what I was getting into. This time, I was choosing it. The road looked exactly as I remembered. After 30 minutes, I saw the trucks. Mason's silent rig, then Hayes. "You came back," Hayes said. "I'm documenting everything. If I can't escape, at least there'll be proof." We drove together to the ice wall. Archer sat beside me and Hayes followed in his own truck. The town appeared briefly. The abandoned version, windows broken, truly empty. And then we were back on the open road. The markers started appearing, first sporadically, then with increasing frequency. A boot sitting upright in the snow, a thermos lying on its side, frost coating the metal, a jacket hanging from a tree branch, swaying slightly in the wind even though there was no breeze. I slowed down, examining each one. They were all trucker items, things a driver might carry, and they were all weathered, faded, like they'd been sitting there for years. "They left these behind," Archer said quietly. "Breadcrumbs, hoping someone would follow them out. But the trail always leads to the same place." We passed a backpack sitting on a mile marker post. I stopped and got out to examine it. Inside were personal items, a wallet with a driver's license expired in '98, a family photo showing a man with a wife and 2 young children, a trucking logbook with entries that cut off abruptly mid-sentence. The name on the license was Derek Mason. "He's still here," Archer said, "driving the loop. Doesn't remember who he was anymore." I put the backpack back carefully, feeling like I was disturbing a grave. We continued on, and the markers became more frequent. Every 100 yards, then every 50, then every 20. They formed a trail leading deeper into whatever this place was. Then I saw it. The ice wall stretching across the road, completely blocking the way forward. It was massive, maybe 20 feet high, the surface rough and irregular. Formations like frozen waves covered it, and the ice had a strange blue-white glow that seemed to come from within. I parked and we got out. Hayes pulled up behind us moments later. "This is it," Archer said. "The end of the road. Literally." I walked up to the wall, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Up close, I could see things frozen inside the ice. Shapes, objects, and faces. At least 15 of them, all wearing expressions of confusion or fear. Their eyes were open, staring out at nothing. "Previous drivers," Hayes said, joining me. "The ones who have been here so long they became part of the road itself." I stared at the nearest face. A man, maybe 40, with frost forming patterns across his skin. His mouth was open slightly, as if he'd been trying to say something when the ice claimed him. "How long?" I asked. "Depends on the person," Hayes replied. "Archer's lasted 37 years. Some disappear after 5 or 6. It's about resistance, how long you can hold on to who you are." I noticed something scratched into the ice near the base of the wall. Letters carved deep into the surface. I knelt down to read them. "The loop can be broken. Find the first marker." "What does that mean?" I asked. Archer crouched beside me, running his finger over the letters. "I don't know, but someone went to a lot of trouble to leave this message." "The first marker," I said. "Not the first chronologically, but the first in sequence. The original." I thought about all the items we'd passed. The boot, the thermos, the jacket, the backpack. They were all relatively recent, placed within the last few decades based on their condition. But what if there was something older, something from when this road first began trapping people? "We need to find it," I said, standing up. "Whatever it is, it might tell us how to break the loop." We formed a line, 18 drivers plus me. All my recording devices were running. 1. Doubt crept in. 2. I wasn't trying to deny the wall. I was accepting it. Accepting I'd gotten lost, gotten trapped. This might be the end. And in that acceptance, the fear released. 3. We walked into the ice. Everything went white. I woke in my truck on I-95, engine running. 2:34 p.m., March 8th. less than 7 hours since I'd left. The storm was over. Sun breaking through clouds. Everything normal. I checked my recordings. Hours of footage. The detour, the loop, the other drivers, the ice wall. Everything captured. Dozens of messages on my phone. I called my wife. "I'm okay. I'm heading home. I think we broke the road." At home, I uploaded everything to multiple cloud services, made backups. Then I watched the footage. My blood ran cold. It showed me driving through a storm, taking a detour, following an empty road. But no other trucks, no towns, no ice wall. Just me alone, driving in circles before falling asleep. No evidence, just a man having what looked like a breakdown. But on the last camera, the dashboard one, in the final moments, there were 18 faint figures holding hands. Translucent, like ghosts. They walked into the wall and passed through. Into normal daylight, normal roads, freedom. The last figure was me, looking back at the wall, smiling. I still have that footage. Most dismiss it as compression artifacts, but I know what happened. Sometimes, late at night, I get calls on my CB, Hayes, Archer, the others. They thank me for coming back, for helping them escape. Then the signal cuts out. I don't drive coastal routes anymore. Moved to inland deliveries. My wife understands, but I keep those recordings backed up everywhere. Instructions that if I disappear, someone should investigate, because I have a feeling our work wasn't complete. The road might still be there, reformed, waiting, and next time there might not be anyone who knows how to break free. So I drive my safe routes, deliver my cargo, go home, and I try not to think about the ice coast, about drivers who might still be trapped, about the loop still cycling. Try not to think about it. But I always fail. Because somewhere out there, on a coastal highway during a storm, there's a detour sign pointing to a road that shouldn't exist. And sooner or later, someone else will take that turn. I can only hope they'll be as lucky as I was, or luckier still that they'll never find it at all.